What if I told you that the life of a knight was less about gallant chivalry and more like a never-ending series of unfortunate events sprinkled with a dash of existential dread? Sounds like a medieval sitcom gone horribly wrong, doesn't it? Strap in, because the truth is a wild ride through mud, blood, and betrayal. Picture this, you, clad in heavy armor, trudging through a swamp while your horse sinks into the muck, because, believe it or not, knights are often less noble heroes and more glorified mud wrestlers. When the call for valor echoed through the kingdom, it wasn't just a summons to battle, it was an invitation to a hell of your own making. Forget the chiseled hero on the cover of a romance novel. Behind every clang of a sword, there lies a man grappling with the stench of desperation and the weight of his own hubris. Knights weren't just wielders of swords, they were also personal janitors of royal messes. Want to go to war? Sure. But first, can you scrub the blood off the battleground from last week's skirmish? And don't forget the charming duty of collecting taxes from peasants who'd rather slit their wrists than hand over their hard-earned grain. Every quest felt less like a noble undertaking and more like a twisted game of try to survive. Spoiler alert, most didn't. Every so-called tournament was less about glory and more about dodging horse hooves and the occasional flying javelin. Glory? Oh, it was there if you could survive the chaos long enough to grasp it. Ever seen a knight at the mercy of a rogue goat? Trust me, that's a sight for sore eyes. The laughter echoes through the ages, yet the humiliation stings like a nettle. Romanticized stories? They gloss over the realities, the rot of betrayal festering in the very halls of power, where alliances are as stable as a drunken horse. Knights were tools, pawns in a game played by kings too busy feasting to care about the men who bled for their whims. Fight for honor, they said, while the knight's stomach rumbled, hungry for more than just glory. And let's not forget the armor. Heavy as a death wish, it clanked and clattered, turning every knight into a human tin can, stumbling and tripping through fields of sharp blades and sharper tongues. Ever tried running on a battlefield in a suit of metal? It's like being a turtle in a race with hares, only the hares are armed and the stakes are your life. So, was life as a knight all swords and glory? Hell no. It was a swirling tempest of laughter mingled with tears, a rollercoaster of absurdity where every swing of the sword might just as easily lead to a backache or a trip to the local leech to drain out last night's dinner. The truth is dark, grotesque, and infinitely more entertaining than any polished tale could ever tell. Ready to peel back the layers of tarnished glory? Good luck, once you step into this world, you might never want to leave. The clash of steel echoed through the twilight, a haunting symphony of desperation and valor that reverberated in the hollow of my chest. I stood there, breathless, my heart pounding like a war drum, caught between the desperate cries of men and the eerie silence that followed their downfall. Shadows danced in the flickering torchlight, ghosts of dreams lost, remnants of a time when knighthood was believed to bring honor, glory, and the unwavering protection of the innocent. But as the blood pooled beneath my feet, I realized the truth was far murkier. Thomas, my childhood friend turned reluctant knight, knelt before me, his armor glinting like a cruel joke in the dying light. His hands trembled around the hilt of his sword, its blade gleaming with both honor and the weight of betrayal. "This isn't what they promised us," he gasped, eyes wide with a mix of fear and fury, searching my face for answers as if I could conjure a way out of this nightmare. I could see the fire in his eyes, a fierce storm raging beneath the surface, a boy fighting to carve out his identity in a world that twisted his dreams into nightmares. "Do you remember? The stories in the tavern? The laughter, the songs," he pleaded, desperation curling like smoke around his words. "They said we'd be heroes," he said, voice cracking, "but all I see is death, and the faces of the people we swore to protect." I remembered the warmth of the hearth, the tales spun by old men who boasted of knights riding into battle, wielding justice like a blade. I remembered the glimmer of hope in the eyes of peasants, the way they looked up to us as if we were gods clad in rusted metal. But the reality was a far cry from those tales. The myths that shone so brightly before had darkened into something grotesque. A figure emerged from the shadows, cloaked in the remnants of night, Lady Eleanor, the fierce and fiery daughter of a noble house, whose spirit had always been as untamed as the wild horses that roamed the moors. She was a force of nature, a resolve forged in the crucible of countless betrayals. You think they care, she spat, voice sharp as a dagger. We're just pawns in their game, fancy pieces on a chessboard where lives are sacrificed for power. The bitterness in her words hung heavy in the air, and I could feel it gnawing at the edges of my hope. But we can change things, I interjected, desperate to cling to any semblance of purpose. We can be the knights they believe we are. A scoff escaped her lips, filled with dark humor that felt like a knife twisting in my gut. You mean the knights who bathe once a year and call it romance? The knights who ride off to war, leaving their beloveds to wonder if they'll ever return. Her laughter echoed, bitter and haunting, like a ghost whispering secrets of the fallen. You think knighthood is about glory? It's about surviving another day in a world that's always ready to devour you. The world spun around me, a tempest of rage and sorrow. I wanted to scream, to cry out against the heavens that had sold us these dreams wrapped in shining armor. But all I could do was stand there, paralyzed, lost in the chaos of our collapsing ideals. Thunder rumbled in the distance, a harbinger of the storm that loomed on the horizon, both literal and metaphorical. The night pressed in, shadows lengthening as the weight of reality began to suffocate my fantasies. I could see it all so clearly, the pomp of tournaments, the lavish feasts where knights toasted to honor, knowing full well the cost of such extravagance lay on the backs of those who toiled in anonymity. I remember, I whispered, clutching the hilt of my own sword, I remember standing in the courtyard, dreaming of battles and glory. The words escaped me, a confession soaked in longing and regret. We fought for something, didn't we? Or was it just an illusion all along? Eleanor's fierce gaze turned soft for a moment, and I could see the flicker of her own dreams crumbling beneath the weight of reality. We fought for each other. That's all we really had. Her voice trembled, a crack in her armor revealing the vulnerability we all carried beneath our bravado. But even as she spoke, the shadows deepened, and the sounds of battle grew nearer. I could feel the pulse of fate quickening, each heartbeat a reminder of the choices we had made. The ghostly figures of the past seemed to dance around us, whispering truths we were too afraid to confront. The knights of old, with their noble quests and gallant deeds, were nothing but echoes against the harshness of a world that demanded more than mere valor. Thomas struggled to his feet, the pain etched on his face like a map of despair. If we can't change what knighthood has become, then what are we even doing here? His voice dipped into a haunting monotone, the words heavy like chains that bound him to his fate. Are we merely cogs in a machine, destined to repeat the cycle of honor and bloodshed? The storm broke above us, cold rain pouring down like silver arrows from the heavens, drenching our hopes and washing away the last shreds of our bravado. The air crackled with tension, the scent of earth and iron mingling, foretelling the confrontation that awaited us, one that would either forge us into legends or reduce us to mere shadows, forgotten in the annals of time. Fight! Eleanor shouted, voice rising above the cacophony, a defiance that ignited something deep within me. Fight not for the glory of knighthood, but for those who cannot fight for themselves. We owe them that much. Her words were a lifeline, a tether to a purpose that transcended the myths and realities that had ensnared us. We were not just knights, we were something more, rebels against a narrative that had long since lost its meaning. As we prepared to face the oncoming storm, a dark exhilaration surged through me. The ghosts of our dreams would not be silenced, they would rise with us, fierce and unyielding. The myths of knighthood may have betrayed us, but in this moment of despair, we found the raw substance of what it truly meant to be a knight. We weren't here to fulfill prophecies but to carve our own destinies, even if they were stained with the blood of our realities. And as the battle loomed ever closer, I could feel the weight of my heartbeat sinking with the rhythm of fate itself. In that moment, standing amidst the chaos, I understood, sometimes, in the darkest of nights, the true meaning of honor isn't found in grand tales, but in the quiet, fierce resolve of a broken heart still willing to fight. The air was thick with smoke, a choking fog that curled like a serpent around the crumbling stones of the castle. I stood there, heart pounding, watching as the flames danced, flickering shadows tracing patterns of despair across the faces of those who had once called this place home. Sir Alaric, a knight whose armor had seen more battles than most could fathom, gripped the hilt of his sword, knuckles white against the grey steel. His eyes, usually fierce and unwavering, now glistened with an intensity that hinted at a storm brewing beneath the surface. I remember when honor was a shield, not a shackle, he whispered, voice trembling as he stared into the inferno. A truth bared naked, raw, and aching. He was a man forged from the fires of glory and the ashes of defeat, a walking contradiction, adored and reviled, noble yet haunted by choices that bore the weight of the world. I felt his pain, a palpable thing, curling around my own heart like tendrils of smoke. Beside him, Lady Eloan stood resolute, her dark hair swirling around her like a tempest. She was fierce, sharp-witted, yet there was a fragility beneath that bravado. She had once dreamed of chivalry, of a world where knights would protect the innocent and slay the dragons that lurked in the shadows of the heart. But now, as she watched the castle burn, the truth burned brighter. Chivalry was but a gilded mask hiding the grotesque face of ambition and betrayal. "This is not the legacy we sought," she shouted, voice cracking, passion igniting like the flames before us. "We were supposed to be the saviors, not the harbingers of destruction. Where is the justice in this?" Her eyes glimmered with unshed tears, a storm of emotion swirling within. I could feel her heartbeat, a rapid drum echoing within the chaos. Every beat screamed of betrayal and loss, of the weight of the sword resting on her shoulder, the burden of expectations that were never hers to bear. What had they become? The very monsters they had sworn to fight? I remember the tales, the tales. The songs sung in the mead halls, where knights were glorious bastions of justice. They bathed once a year. So yeah, romance was earthy. They spoke of valor in the face of peril, of noble quests and enchanted maidens. Tales spun from dreams, I scoffed, but even in my mockery, I felt that ache in my soul, a yearning for a time when the world was less muddled, when right and wrong seemed clearer. But the truth was more sinister. The knights, those shining figures on gallant steeds, were often just men who bled and cried and loved deeply but were trapped in a web of duty and expectation. The weight of the sword pressed down, suffocating. Voices of ghosts echoed in the courtyard, the whispers of those who had come before, knights whose spirits lingered, burdened by the echoes of their choices. Remember how they raised their glasses to honor the fallen? Alaric's voice turned gravelly, an edge of bitterness threading through. They never spoke of the blood that stained the ground beneath them. They never sang of the families shattered by our glory. With every word, I felt the air grow heavier, the smoke swirling around us like the memories of glory now tainted by guilt. Shadows danced and flickered, showing visions of battles fought and lost, of promises made in the heat of a moment but broken in the chill of reality. I could almost see the faces of those lost, their eyes wide with fear, their pleas echoing through the ages. Why? Why? Eloan stepped forward, her hand trembling as she pointed toward the flames. We made our choices. We let the legends mold us into something monstrous. Her voice cracked, a fragile bird trying to take flight in a storm. But we are not made of just tales, Alaric. We are human. We bleed. And in that moment, it was as if the world held its breath, the flames crackling ominously, a backdrop to the storm raging within our trio. Time stretched. I could feel the weight of centuries pressing down, a silent judgment from the past, the ghosts of knighthood watching, waiting for the folly of their descendants to play out once more. I remember my own heart constricting in that silence, the undeniable truth that roared like a tempest within me. The legends had promised valor, but reality painted a different picture, one of blood-soaked fields and hearts left in tatters, of ambition clashing with duty. The romanticized visage of knighthood twisted and crumbled, revealing the rotten core beneath. Yet, Alaric's voice broke through the fog of despair, a spark igniting in the ashes. We can choose differently. We can be the change, Eloan. We can redefine what it means to be a knight. His words hung in the air, charged with the raw energy of hope, a beacon amidst the darkness. Eloan, caught in the whirlwind, shook her head, torn between the desperation to believe and the haunting shadows that clawed at her heart. But the world is not kind to those who seek to change it. Her voice trembled, a haunting melody that echoed into the night, filling the void between us. And there we stood, three souls entwined in a web of conflict and desire, each battling our own shadows, Alaric, grappling with the remnants of a legacy that held him captive, Eloan, wrestling with the weight of expectations that threatened to crush her spirit, and me, a mere observer caught in the storm, struggling to find my own place in the cacophony of history's whispers. The flames roared, illuminating the truth that lay bare before us. The essence of knighthood was not in the sword, nor in the grand tales passed down through generations, but in the choices we made, the vulnerability we embraced, the humanity we fought to preserve. As the castle crumbled around us, I felt the pulse of history in my veins, a heartbeat echoed by the spirits of those who had walked before. This was not an ending, it was a beginning, a chance to rewrite the legends that had long since turned sour. And as the night deepened, the shadows around us grew longer, the air crackling with unanswered questions and the promise of what lay ahead. The specters of the past danced in the flames, their voices a haunting melody of nostalgia and regret. The story was far from over, it was merely turning its next page, waiting for us to choose the words that would fill it. The echoes of knighthood lingered still, a tapestry woven with threads of heartache and valor, the lines blurring between hero and monster, dreamer and reality. The night was dark, but somewhere, deep within the embers, a flicker of hope ignited, the kind of hope that whispered daringly, that perhaps, just perhaps, we could create a new legend, one forged from the ashes of the old. The thunder of hooves echoed like a heartbeat in the cold morning air, a relentless, pounding reminder of the world outside this makeshift training ground. Dust kicked up around the feet of the horses, swirling like ghosts of those who had fallen before. I stood there, adrenaline coursing through my veins, my chest tight with a mix of fear and exhilaration. Here, amidst the clang of metal and the shouts of trainers, I was less a boy and more a vessel, filled with the raw ache of ambition and the burden of expectation. "Cyrus! Your form!" The shrill voice of Sir Alden cut through the chaos, a whip-crack command that sent a jolt of shame through me. I straightened, fists clenching my sword tighter. I remember the way the sunlight glinted off the blade, a promise of glory and a reminder of the ghosts that haunted its edge. I was not there to play. I was there to become something more, something terrifyingly great, yet the weight of every failure hung like a noose around my neck. Across the field, Seraphine moved with the grace of a wildflower bending in the wind. She was both a light and a shadow, fierce and vulnerable, and every time I saw her perfect stance marred by a flicker of doubt, my heart would twist. "Why do you hesitate?" I once asked her, breathless from weariness. She merely shrugged, her smile all too fleeting, like a sunbeam that vanishes behind storm clouds. "Fear is a dance partner," she said, her voice soft but steady. "You can choose to lead." It was a lesson I couldn't grasp then, not with the sweat stinging my eyes and my heart thundering louder than the horses. She was my rival, my friend, my unspoken desire, all tangled in one. I remember her laughter, light and haunting, like a song echoing through empty halls. In her company, I felt both power and its absence, the thrill of potential wrapped in the fear of failure. Then there was Edwin, all bravado and bravura, with laughter that rang like silver bells in the night. He wore his confidence like armor, yet behind the bravado lay scars deeper than any sword could inflict. "This is nothing," he would say, swinging his sword with a flourish, as if taunting the very air. But I glimpsed the cracks beneath the surface, the way his smile would falter when no one was watching, the flicker of terror in his eyes when he thought of the battles yet to come. I remember the night he confided in me, beneath a sky lit with a million cold stars. "What if I falter?" he whispered, a crack in his facade. "What if I'm not enough?" In that moment, the cosmos felt impossibly vast, like a void that threatened to swallow us both. I could only respond with the truth that burned in my throat. "We are nothing without our scars, Edwin. They are our stories." The training was relentless, each session a grueling dance around the specters of our doubts. The clang of swords ringing in the air was a symphony of our fears, a reminder that failure wasn't just a possibility, it was a lurking ghost, waiting to pull us under. Each time we clashed, it was not just steel against steel, it was heart against heart, desperation against determination. I remember how one morning, dawn creeping over the horizon like a shy lover, I stumbled, feet tangled in my own ambition. Alden's laughter echoed, cold and cutting. "You'll become nothing but another casualty, another whisper in the wind." Those words cut deeper than any sword. I remember the taste of iron in my mouth, the sting of failure biting at my pride. Every setback felt like a cruel twist of fate, each wound a testament to my inadequacy. In those moments, the laughter of my companions became shadows, haunting reminders of what I could lose. Despite the chaos, we forged a bond that was as fierce as the blades we trained with. Late at night, we would sit around the flickering fire, the stars our witnesses. Edwin would recount tales of past warriors, their victories glowing like embers in the darkness. Seraphine would share her dreams, weaving them into the fabric of our lives, filling the empty spaces with hope. But the laughter never quite silenced the tension, the unacknowledged fears that loomed over us, heavy as the night. "Cyrus, if we are to survive, we must embrace the darkness," Seraphine whispered one night, her eyes reflecting the firelight, fierce and alive. "Fear is a compass. It tells us where we need to go." I didn't understand then, not fully, but I felt it gnawing at my insides like a hunger I couldn't name. The days turned to weeks, and the training grew more intense. The rhythm of our lives became a pulse, each heartbeat a clash of swords, each breath a reminder of the stakes. The pressure was unrelenting, a storm swirling around us, driving us closer to the edge of something monumental. One fateful morning, a failure would rip through our ranks with the ferocity of a gale. The sun was a distant memory, the clouds thick and heavy above us, and as we lined up for drills, I could feel the tension in the air, palpable and electric. Edwin faltered, not in his swordplay, but in his spirit. The moment hung like a pendulum, and I watched as he stumbled, his laugh crumbling into silence, his bravado evaporating like mist. It was a moment that changed everything. The weight of expectation, the haunting shadows of our fears, they all converged, and in that silence, I could feel the earth shift beneath our feet. I remember the cold dread pooling in my stomach, the feeling that we were on the brink of something monumental, something that would either break us or forge us anew. "Cyrus, help him," Seraphine's voice broke through the haze, urgent and raw. And in that moment, I realized this was more than just training, it was survival. But how do you save someone when you can barely save yourself? As I rushed to Edwin's side, the world around me faded. The clang of metal, the howling wind, everything fell silent. The weight of our struggles pressed down, and I could feel the specter of despair gripping us all. I took a breath, the air sharp as winter, and as I reached for him, I felt the threads of our fates intertwining, binding us together in this chaotic dance. The moment hung heavy, dripping with tension. Could we rise from this? Would we stand united, or would we shatter like glass? Either way, the path ahead was fraught with shadows, each step a reminder of the price we would pay for glory. I remembered my sword, the weight of it in my hand, not just a weapon but a conduit for everything we stood for. And in that moment, amid the swirling chaos, it was clear, this was only the beginning. The air is thick with sweat and the rancid scent of unwashed bodies as the sun breaks over the training yard, casting long shadows that dance like specters. I remember the crack of the whip, sharp and unforgiving, a sound that slices through the morning haze. The boys, no older than 10, flinch in unison, their eyes wide with fear and determination. This is not a game. This is a crucible. The stones beneath our feet are cold, unforgiving, and the weight of expectation presses down like a heavy cloak. I see Thomas, his brow slick with perspiration, teeth clenched as he grips the hilt of his wooden sword. He's a bull of a boy, stout and stubborn, but today, there's a tremor in his hands. He wants to be a knight, to wear the shining armor that glints like a promise. But each swing of the sword, each call to fight, feels like a betrayal against the boy he used to be. "I have to," he whispers to himself, half prayer, half curse. The words hang in the air, thick with desperation. And then there's Edgar, all sharp angles and restless energy. He paces like a caged animal, his mind racing with dreams of glory. "Did you hear? Sir Cedric will be watching us today." His voice carries a tremor of hope, but I know the truth lurking in his heart. A knight's life is not about glory, it's a bitter pill swallowed with blood. I watch his eyes dart to the ground, to the very spot where boys before us have fallen, defeated by their own fears. The sun rises higher while the first clash of swords rings out like a church bell, echoing off the walls of the courtyard. It's brutal, a ballet of violence, and I'm caught in its rhythm. We circle each other, hearts racing, the stakes rising with each strike. Each blow is a question: can you endure? Will you bleed for this? I remember the taste of iron on my tongue after a particularly harsh bout, the way it mingled with the bitterness of tears. Strike harder! The instructor bellows, his voice slicing through the air like a dagger. I glance at him, his eyes are void of expectation, and I feel it, the weight of 100 gazes, the history of warriors who came before us. It's a suffocating presence, and I don't want to disappoint. But what of my own dreams? There's a pause, an eerie silence that blankets us, as if the world is holding its breath, waiting for something, anything to happen. The whispers of the past rustle in the air. I think of the legends of knights who rode into battle with courage gleaming in their eyes, but I also remember the stories of boys like us, their lives extinguished before they had the chance to truly live. The whip cracks again, but this time it's not in the air. It's the sharp sound of a boy's laughter that pierces through the haze, a jarring reminder of innocence lost. It's Edgar, trying to lighten the mood, but his laugh is tinged with desperation. What's the worst that could happen? We might just die gloriously. The laughter fades, replaced by the harsh reality of our existence, the promise of knighthood that feels more like a curse. I see Thomas again. His shoulders slump, the fight slowly draining from him. Perhaps it's better to be a farmer, he murmurs, a secret thought spilling from his lips. At least they sleep soundly at night. I want to reach out to him, to tell him he's not alone, but the moment is lost as the instructor's voice booms again, demanding our attention. You think this is a game? You think you can frolic in fields and dream of glory? No. A knight's life is sacrifice. Pain. Suffering. And there it is, the truth laid bare, the ghost of dreams haunting us. Each word cuts deeper than the last. Pain. Suffering. I remember my mother's face, the tears in her eyes as she sent me off with nothing but hope and a wooden sword. Was it worth it? Would she still believe in me if she saw me now? The sun stretches high, the oppressive heat wrapping around us like a shroud. I catch Edgar's eye, he is smiling, but it's a mask, a fragile shield against the despair creeping in. Let's give them something to remember, he says, voice quivering with false bravado, and I nearly laugh at the absurdity. What will they remember? The sound of laughter drowned in blood? As the day wears on, the training intensifies, and with each clash of wood against wood, I feel my heart beat louder, a war drum urging me to push through the pain. But the exhaustion is creeping in, pulling at my limbs like the grip of death itself. I see Thomas again, falling to his knees, gasping for breath, and I feel a pang of helplessness. He's not just a boy, he's a part of me, a reminder of all that could be lost in the pursuit of honor. Get up, the instructor roars, but the desperation in Thomas's eyes is palpable. I want to scream, to tell the world that this is wrong, but my voice is swallowed by the noise, a cacophony of boyhood dreams being shattered against cold, hard reality. And then it happens, the moment we've all dreaded. A boy falls, a blade slips, and screams pierce the air, ripping through the training yard like a wraith. Time slows, and I can't breathe. Edgar is beside me, eyes wide, and for a heartbeat, we share a silent understanding, this is what we signed up for. The instructor rushes in, a dark shadow against the light, barking orders, but all I can see is the boy crumpled on the ground, the dream of knighthood bleeding out before our eyes. It's a haunting image, a reminder that this life isn't just about glory. It's about sacrifice, pain, and loss. As the commotion swirls around me, my heart thunders in my ears, a relentless drum echoing the fears I cannot voice. I remember the laughter, the innocence of what we once were, and it slips away like grains of sand through clenched fingers. And I think, what does it mean to be a knight? To fight and bleed, to sacrifice everything for a dream that may never be. The sun begins to set, casting the courtyard in shadows, and I feel the weight of destiny closing in. There's no turning back now. The battle is just beginning, and I am tangled in its web, caught between hope and despair, forever destined to chase the elusive ghost of honor. The air is thick with the acrid scent of gunpowder, a bitter perfume clinging to every breath. It presses against my chest, stifling, suffocating. I stand in the remnants of a once vibrant village, now reduced to a graveyard of despair, shouting over the roar of chaos. Shadows flicker in the hazy distance, figures moving with purpose and dread. My heart races, a metronome of fear and anticipation. I can almost hear the echoes of laughter from the children who once played here, now silenced by the relentless drums of war. I remember the moment he fell, my brother, my best friend. How the world slowed, a cruel trick of time as I screamed his name, but it was a hollow sound, swallowed by the chaos. I see him now, Mark, always the braver one, charging into the fray with a wild grin. "What's life without a little danger?" he used to say, his voice a melody of reckless abandon. But this wasn't the adventure he envisioned. No epic tales would come from this battlefield, only the ghosts of our youth. The gunfire is relentless, a symphony of destruction. Each shot feels like a knife to the gut, twisting with every echo. I crouch behind the crumbling wall, my skin prickling as shards of rock rain down like deadly confetti. The sound is a constant reminder of fragility, that life is a flickering candle in a storm. I clutch my rifle, fingers trembling, heart pounding like a war drum against my ribs. I close my eyes for a moment, wishing the world would still. Wishing I could go back to the safe warmth of our mother's kitchen, the smell of bread baking, her laughter echoing in the air. But here, there is only the clatter of boots on dirt, the cries of the wounded, and the weight of despair clinging to my shoulders. "Stay low," comes a voice, distant yet urgent. It's Sarah, my sergeant, her eyes fierce, a wildfire against the backdrop of grey. She moves with a grace born from desperation, each step calculated, as if she can outsmart the very bullets that seek to snatch her breath away. I watch her, a fierce spirit wrapped in vulnerability, channeling the weight of our mission into every action. She's the glue that holds us together, a lighthouse in the storm of combat, yet I see the shadows beneath her bravado. The flicker of doubt, the unspoken fear of loss. She's afraid of us dying, yes, but more so of surviving this. Of bearing the scars long after the guns go silent. "Mark!" I scream again, the name tearing from my throat like a wounded animal. The air grows thicker, suffocating. There's no response, only the chaos, only the looming spectre of loss. I remember when we spoke about dreams, about the lives we'd lead after this, a shared future filled with laughter and stories. Now, those dreams sit like ghosts in the corners of my mind, haunting me, taunting me with what could have been. "Get it together!" Sarah shouts, her voice a lifeline in the raging storm. "We need to move!" The urgency in her tone slices through the haze, and I nod, though my heart feels heavy with the weight of despair. I'm not ready. I'm not ready to face it head-on, the reality of combat, the dangers that lurk around every corner, and the discomfort of knowing I might never see home again. The shadows shift again, and I can almost hear the whispers of the fallen, urging me forward. I step into the fray, adrenaline surging, heartbeat pounding, a primal rhythm. Every step feels like a betrayal to the memory of those lost, yet the fight pulls me, a siren's call. I am a soldier, but I am also a brother, a son, a friend. Life is a cacophony of contradictions, the exhilarating highs pounding against the crushing lows. Then, it happens. A blast, sudden and deafening, rips through the air. The world explodes in a cloud of dust and debris, a hellscape swirling in chaos. I'm thrown back, landing hard against the ground, breath knocked out of me. Panic floods my veins, and I scramble to regain my bearings, heart racing in a dance with the unknown. I feel the warmth of blood trickling from a wound I can't even register yet, just pain, raw and consuming. Sarah's voice cuts through the chaos, fierce and commanding. "Get up. We have to go." I look toward her, and in that moment I see the desperation etched in her features, the frantic determination battling against the weight of fear. Her hands tremble as they guide me forward, pushing me through the haze, and I want to scream in protest, but the sound dies in my throat. I am not the only one burdened by the weight of war. As we sprint through the debris, I catch sight of another soldier crumpled on the ground, clutching a wound, his face contorted in agony. Time stretches, slows, and the world narrows to the struggling breaths of a life slipping away. I turn, my heart threatening to break, the weight of the moment a leaden collar around my neck. Each gasp he takes mirrors my own, shallow, desperate, pleading for something beyond the chaos. "Help," he croaks, a haunting echo that sends chills dancing down my spine. I scream inside, the horror of it all crashing over me like a tidal wave, every heartbeat screaming to run, to hide, to escape, but the reality holds fast. This is combat. This is the reality of discomfort, where humanity battles against the primal instinct to survive. Each moment stretches, tangible and raw, yet all that remains is the echo of loss, the taste of ash, the scent of blood mingling with the fading cries of hope. Keep moving. Sarah shouts again, pulling me from my trance. I stumble forward, each footfall heavy, laden with ghosts of those who once stood beside us. I remember the laughter, the dreams, the innocence lost to the clutches of war. The shadows deepen, and as we press on, the screams fade into a haunting silence, an eerie reminder that in this reality, the danger is not just the gunfire, but the very act of survival itself. We are not just fighting for our lives, we are grasping at shards of humanity, clinging to the fragments of who we were before the world turned dark. And still, we move forward, driven by the flickering flame of hope, even as the night closes in, a shroud of uncertainty enveloping the battlefield. We are warriors, yes, but we are also human, and that truth is its own kind of battlefield. The fight goes on, relentless, unyielding, and I know in my bones that this moment will remain etched in my soul, a scar that time cannot erase, an ever-present reminder of the reality of combat, where the dangers and discomforts intertwine like lovers lost in a tragic embrace. The air is thick, stale with the scent of sweat, blood, and an unshakable dread. I can taste the metallic tang of fear on my tongue as I stand, heart thundering like a war drum, watching the chaos unfold before me. Steel clinks and clangs, a cacophony of life and death. Men, once proud and resolute, devolve into frantic shadows, their faces painted with desperation and horror. I remember the sound of a scream, raw and primal, ripping through the chaos, a sound so visceral it reverberates deep within my bones. There's a man, a soldier named Roland, his eyes wide like saucers, flickering with disbelief as the battlefield swallows him whole. I see him clutching his sword, knuckles white, as if it were a lifeline. His dreams of glory have morphed into a nightmarish tableau, a swirling vortex where valor meets annihilation. I remember when we spoke of honor, of battles fought for the sake of land and legacy. Now, all that remains is the stench of sweat-soaked despair, a million hopes extinguished in an instant. Blood sprays across the ground, the vivid red a stark contrast to the muddy earth beneath. I see limbs flying, severed by cruel blades, bodies crumpling like discarded marionettes in the hands of a merciless puppeteer. Each death is a story, each gasp for breath a lamentation, a deep yearning for an end that never comes. I can't help but think of the families left behind, waiting for their men to return, unaware of the gruesome fate that has befallen them. The battlefield, a graveyard masquerading as a stage, an endless loop of carnage that refuses to relent. And then there's Lila. She fights not with a sword but with a courage that pierces through the veil of despair. I see her dart between the chaos, her silhouette a fleeting shadow, a glimpse of defiance in a world gone mad. She had once spoken of the love she held for her brother, a soldier who marches with blooded hands, lost in the fog of war. I will bring him home, she vowed, her voice trembling yet fierce. But now? Now, her resolve is a flickering candle threatened by the tempest of fate. I remember the way her hands trembled as she bandaged a wounded soldier, her face a mask of determination, masking the fear that threatened to unravel her sanity. Will she find him? Will she bear witness to his last breath? The ground shakes beneath my feet as the clash of steel rises to a fever pitch, a symphony of anguish and fury. I can feel the pulse of desperation, a drumbeat that resonates with the very essence of life and death. It's a grotesque dance, where the lines between heroism and horror blur, a mesmerizing chaos that captivates and repulses. I remember seeing a man fall, his scream piercing the air like a shot, a desperate plea echoing in the hearts of those who remain. I thought of his mother, perhaps, waiting by the hearth, knitting a scarf, unaware that her son's laughter had been silenced forever. The sight of a fallen warrior, his face frozen in a rictus of terror, strikes me to the core. I remember the stories of knights in shining armor, brave souls cleaving through darkness. But here, in this moment, there is no glory, only raw terror. a visceral reminder that life can be extinguished in the blink of an eye, and all that remains is the haunting echo of what once was. The cries of the wounded become a symphony of despair, each note a reminder that hope is but a fleeting shadow. Amidst the frenzy, Roland finds Lila, their eyes locking in a moment that defies chaos. In that fleeting connection, I see a flicker of humanity, a tether that binds them amidst the storm. He reaches for her, but instead of a warm embrace, he is met with the chilling reality of blood-soaked hands, of lives forever altered by the merciless hand of fate. "Where is my brother?" Lila's voice is a whisper carried away by the wind, lost among the screams and the clash of swords. Roland's mouth opens, but no words come out, only the bitter taste of fear as he glances at the horizon, where shadows lurk like specters waiting to claim more souls. In that gruesome tableau of chaos, time becomes a cruel trickster. Moments stretch and warp, lingering like the echo of a ghost, reminding us that life is but a fragile thread. I remember the feeling of time slipping through my fingers, the realization that every heartbeat could be my last. The battle is unrelenting, a beast of chaos that cares not for dreams or desires, only for the blood it demands. As the sun sinks low, casting long shadows over the fallen, I feel the weight of their despair, the suffocating grip of mortality. I watch as Roland clutches Lila's hand, a desperate plea for connection amid the horror, a silent promise of survival that may never come to pass. The sky burns crimson, a fiery omen of the bloodshed to come. The air crackles with tension, thick with unspoken fears, as the din of battle crescendos into a harrowing climax. I cannot look away, nor can I look away from my own heart, pounding in rhythm with the chaos, each beat a reminder that we are all mere mortals dancing on the edge of oblivion. Will they survive this night? Will they hold on to their humanity in the face of such relentless brutality? Or will they, like so many before them, be consumed by the darkness that looms ever closer, ready to swallow them whole? I remember that this is only the beginning, a small piece of a larger tapestry woven from the threads of human suffering and resilience, chaos and clarity. The battle rages on, and with it, the stories of those who fight, who bleed, who fear are forever etched in the annals of time, echoing through the ages. The ground trembles beneath the weight of my armor, a cacophony of clinking metal and muffled breaths as I struggle to catch my own. I stand at the edge of a blackened forest, the trees looming like sentinels, their twisted branches reaching out with gnarled fingers, beckoning or warning, I can't tell which. Shadows flicker like restless spirits, and I sense the heavy heartbeat of the night wrapping around me, squeezing tighter with every passing second. I remember the first time I donned this cursed metal. I was 15, too young to understand the burden I was taking on. My father, a knight of our fallen kingdom, had smiled with pride as he placed the cold plates on my shoulders. "One day, you'll be a hero," he had declared, but his smile was a mask, hiding the fear that gripped his heart. I can almost hear his voice, echoing through the hollow shell of memory. Heroes don't just wear armor, they carry the weight of the world. And how I had believed him. But now, as I stand here, the truth feels like a dagger twisting in my gut. The armor is not glory, it's a chain, dragging me deeper into despair. The clang of swords, the cries of the fallen, these are the ghostly companions I cannot escape. The battle rages nearby, a chaotic symphony of chaos that sends chills racing down my spine. I want to scream, but the sound dies in my throat, choked by the very metal designed to protect me. Beside me, Ilara sharpens her dagger, her fingers steady, yet I can see the tremor beneath her skin. She was once a bard, her voice a soothing balm to the wounds of war, but now it feels like she's lost in a labyrinth of her own making. I remember when she sang of love and laughter, her melodies weaving through the hearts of soldiers like a gentle breeze. Now, her songs are but whispers in the storm, drowned by the weight of this relentless fight. The dagger gleams in her palm, a reminder of what she must do. "You can hear them, can't you?" she murmurs, her voice barely lifting above the din of the ones we've lost. "They're calling for us." And they are. I can hear their laughter mingled with cries, a ghostly symphony that haunts me, each note a reminder of failure. The laughter echoes through the trees, taunting me, a reminder of promises unfulfilled, a reminder that we are nothing but shadows in the night. Ilara's eyes dart to the horizon, where flames lick the sky, consuming everything in their path, hope, dreams, lives. Her breath hitches, and I can almost taste the desperation that clings to her words like a heavy fog. We should move. We can't linger here. But I am rooted, fear chaining me to the ground. What if we fail? I whisper, and the question hangs in the air, heavy and suffocating. The weight of my armor presses down, but it is not merely the physical burden, it is the anguish of so many lives resting on my shoulders. I remember their faces, the innocents caught in the crossfire. I cannot shake the feeling that every step I take forward is a step deeper into the abyss, a path leading to ruin, not glory. Failure is inevitable, Elara replies, her voice steady yet laced with a tremor of raw emotion. But we fight anyway. Her gaze pierces me, and for a moment, I see the flicker of the old Elara, the fierce girl who faced down the mightiest dragon with nothing but a song and a dream. We fight for them. For those who can't. She clenches her jaw, determination burning in her eyes. I look down at my hands, encased in metal, trembling with the weight of this truth. I was supposed to be a hero, yet here I am, a pawn on a battlefield soaked in shadows. The moon watches, a silent observer of our plight, and I feel its cold gaze as a reminder that time slips away, each ticking second pulling me deeper into the darkness. I remember a time when I believed in destiny, in the idea that we could change the world. But now? Now, I see only ghosts and echoes, memories of dreams long extinguished. With a sudden rush, I tear my gaze away from the horizon, and I meet Ilara's fierce stare. Then let us fight, I say, though my heart quakes at the thought. We fight for them. My voice, a whisper, gains strength as I say it again, louder this time, igniting a flicker of resolve within me. For them. The weight of my armor feels a fraction lighter, and I grip my sword, feeling its familiar coldness against my palm, ready to join the fray. As we step forward, the forest shifts, a living entity cloaked in darkness, watching, waiting. Each crunch of leaves beneath our feet sends ripples of tension through the air, the calm before a storm, an omen that shadows our every move. I can feel the eyes of the world upon us, the weight of its judgment, the burden of its hopes. In the distance, the sounds of battle crescendo, a symphony of chaos orchestrated by fate. We race toward the clamor, hearts pounding, breaths shallow. The air thickens with the scent of smoke, a sickly sweetness that clings to our lungs, and the cries of the wounded become a siren's call, a haunting melody that beckons us deeper into the chaos. With every step, I feel the armor's weight pressing down harder, a relentless reminder that glory is a fickle mistress, and the true burden lies not in the metal we wear but in the choices we make. I remember the laughter of those lost, the promises made, the dreams dashed against the rocks of reality. I remember them. Always, each memory a shackle, binding me to this fight. And as we plunge into the fray, I know one thing above all, the armor is a cage, but it is also my shield, the weight of it all more burden than glory, yet still, I carry it. We carry it. The ghosts of our past guide us as we fight for a future yet unwritten, not knowing if we will emerge as heroes or become mere echoes in the void. The world was a cacophony of clashing steel and anguished cries, each sound a relentless reminder of the battle waging outside the castle walls. I could taste the metallic tang of fear on my tongue, a bitter reminder of the heavy armor encasing my body like a second skin. It was more than a mere protection against swords and arrows, it was a coffin that stole my breath, my spirit. And in that moment, as I stood with my heart racing and sweat pooling beneath the cold, unyielding metal, I remembered. I remembered the days before the armor, when movement was fluid, when I could dance with the wind rather than wrestle against it. Can't breathe, can't move, I gasped, the weight of the breastplate crushing down, a mocking reminder that I was not built for this life. And there was Eloan, just a few paces away, her eyes wide with fear, her hands trembling as she adjusted her gauntlets, the iron grinding together like teeth gnashing in the dark. She was the light in this living nightmare, fierce and unwavering, but I could see it, the way her shoulders slumped under the burden of her own encasement, the way her mouth quirked in an effort to mask the pain. I'm fine, she lied, but I saw the truth in the shadows beneath her eyes, flickering like candle flames threatened by a gust of wind. The weight of her armor was not just physical, it gnawed at her spirit, a slow erosion of the vibrant warrior I had once known. I wanted to reach out, to tell her it would be okay, but my body felt like a lead weight, anchored to the ground, every muscle screaming for relief. Stay close, I said, my voice barely a whisper, and I could feel the tremor in it like an earthquake threatening to break free. She nodded, but I knew we were both teetering on the edge, a precipice so fragile that one misstep would plunge us into darkness. The clamor of battle surged, each clash a reminder of the stakes. I glanced toward the horizon, where smoke curled like the fingers of death reaching for the sky. The sun was swallowed by clouds, a harbinger of storms both outside and within. I think of the men who donned these suits of iron, how they swaggered, how the legends of their bravery spun through taverns like wild tales. They never spoke of the agony, they never shared the truth that each clash of steel against steel was a reminder of their own mortality, of the weariness that seeped into their very bones. Do you remember the festival? Eloan's voice broke through my reverie, and her question hung in the air like a promise. The dancing, the laughter, the smell of fresh bread, I nodded, the memory flooding back like a burst dam. The villagers adorned in bright colors, spinning beneath the stars. The jester fell into the pig pen, I chuckled, the mirth suddenly brittle in my throat. The poor pig, she grinned, but her smile was tinged with sorrow. I saw it then, the ghost of what we had lost in this endless cycle of war, in the heavy metal that coursed through our veins like poison. The clang of swords drew closer, and I felt the urgency shift, morphing into something primal. In that moment, I could see it, the toll of our choices, the steel that bound us, the weight that distorted our essence. Each warrior was a shadow of their former selves, trapped in a relentless dance of warfare while their bodies screamed for release. And then there was Roderick, a friend whose laughter rang like a bell in my heart. He stumbled out of the fray, his armor dented, a grotesque collage of battle scars. I saw him wince as he bent to catch his breath, the burden of metal pushing him to the ground. I remembered laughing with him, recalling tales of grand triumphs and absurd defeats, but now his spirit flickered like a candle in a tempest. The reality was grim, the armor did not make a warrior, it confined him, tortured him. Push through, he gasped, but I could see he was fighting more than just the enemy. The weight of the world pressed down on him, the iron consuming him from the inside out. He cursed under his breath, and I could almost hear the echoes of the past, of the boy who had dreamed of glory, who now faced the grim reality of his own body betraying him. "Roderick!" I shouted, but the roar of chaos drowned my voice. I could sense the urgency mounting, the realization that we were not just fighting for a kingdom but for the very essence of who we were. It was the armor that shredded our souls, that confined us to the roles we never intended to play. "Stay with me!" Eloan called, her voice fierce, but it wavered against the tide of despair. I could feel the ground beneath us shifting, like quicksand ready to swallow us whole. Each movement became a battle of its own, the armor a relentless reminder of our mortality. In that moment, I thought of the dreams we'd had, the stars we had wished upon, and how they now felt like distant echoes. Time stretched, warped by the burden of metal and the impending threat of loss. I remembered the stories, the laughter, the breath of freedom that once filled our lungs. The thought of it made my heart ache, a ghostly reminder of what we had become, the shadows of ourselves, clanking through a world that had no patience for the frailty of the human spirit. "Keep moving," a voice barked, and we pushed forward, the weight of our armor a ghostly chain that bound us to the ground. I could feel Roderick's presence, a flickering flame against the encroaching darkness, but I knew that the toll was high. The heavy metal was not the only cost, it consumed our hearts, our laughter, our very will to live. I faced Eloan, my eyes locked onto hers, and in that moment, we shared a silent understanding. It was not just the war outside that threatened to claim us, it was the very armor that encased our bodies, suffocating our dreams, our hopes. As the battle raged on, I took a breath, a deep, shuddering intake that felt as though it might shatter my ribs. I could feel every heartbeat reverberate through my chest, a reminder of our humanity buried beneath the weight of our choices. I remembered the laughter, the dancing, the fleeting moments of joy, and I swore to carry them with me, even in the darkest of times. Together, Eloan breathed, and in that single word, I felt an unbreakable bond. We would move forward, not just for ourselves, but for the echoes of laughter lost in the chaos. We would fight against the shadows that loomed, against the weight that sought to extinguish our very souls. The clash of steel grew louder, the world around us a whirlwind of chaos, but I held on to that promise. We would find a way, through the darkness, through the pain, through the suffocating embrace of heavy armor. And we would not just survive, we would remember. We would be the flickering lights in a world that often forgot how to dance. The distant clang of metal against metal reverberated through the cold, damp air, a haunting echo that clutched at the throat. I crouched behind a crumbling wall, heart racing, breath shallow, listening, always listening. Shadows danced in the flickering torchlight, twisting and writhing like the ghosts of fallen knights, their spectral faces a blend of honor and despair. This was the night when everything would change, when chivalry, an oath sworn upon the edge of a sword, would reveal its true, twisted nature. Elena was across the courtyard, her silhouette framed by the dying embers of the bonfire, a celestial figure caught in a dream. But dreams can turn into nightmares. She was my heart, the light in my darkest hours, yet tonight she stood on the precipice of danger, unaware of the storm brewing in her wake. I could see the determination in her stance, the way her fists clenched, a warrior's resolve, yet tinged with a vulnerability that cut deeper than any blade. And then there was Sir Cedric. His name was a chant on the lips of the townsfolk, a promise of justice wrapped in a polished armor. But beneath the surface, a tempest brewed, scarred by the past, his heart a mosaic of betrayal and unwavering duty. I could feel the weight of his chivalric code, a suffocating cloak that rendered him a prisoner of his own ideals. In that moment, I saw him, a man torn between the oath he'd sworn and the love that thrummed in his veins, love that threatened to crumble under the weight of ambition. Honor! Cedric thundered, voice echoing against stone like a battle cry. We defend the realm, we protect our own. His words surged through the air, but they felt hollow, like the empty promises of a lover who never returned. I could see the glimmer of doubt in his eyes, a flicker of something raw and desperate. What was honor without love? What was duty without the warmth of a beating heart beside you? The night pressed in around us, wrapping us in its cold embrace. A shiver danced along my spine. I remember the stories of knights, glorious tales filled with valor and romance. But the truth? Reality had a way of stripping away the shine, revealing the rust beneath. The stench of sweat and fear hung thick, and I grasped the hilt of my sword, feeling its pulse echo my own. What was I fighting for? Honor? Love? Or something far darker that lurked in the shadows, waiting to ensnare us all? A scream shattered the night, raw and piercing, a sound that clawed at the very fabric of my soul. I spun toward the source, heart thundering like a war drum. Elena! No, it couldn't be. Had she stepped into the path of danger, driven by some reckless notion of bravery? I pushed myself forward, muscles coiling with urgency, the world around me blurring into a whirlwind of chaos and desperation. I remember the taste of iron on my tongue, the frantic beat of my heart, and then I saw her. She was backed into a corner, face pale, eyes wide with fear, the flames of the bonfire illuminating the terror etched upon her features. And there he was, a dark figure, an enemy cloaked in malice. The way he towered over her made my stomach twist, a vice of rage tightening around my throat. Step away from her! I shouted, the words bursting forth like a dam breaking, flooding the air with an electric tension. I felt the weight of Cedric's gaze on me, a mixture of admiration and disbelief. But honor had changed, it was no longer a gleaming knight on a noble steed. It was a wild beast, unchained and thrashing, snarling and ready to devour everything in its path. Elena's eyes found mine, a connection that transcended the chaos. In that fleeting moment, time fractured like glass, memories surged forward, echoes of laughter shared in sunlit meadows, whispered dreams beneath a star-studded sky. But the panicked breaths brought me back to the present, the reality that lay before us, sharp and unforgiving. Cedric, I called, desperation lacing my tone. The code says we protect those we love. I could see him wrestling with the chivalric ideals that had governed his life, the rules forged in the fires of centuries, now tainted with the blood of innocence. I felt the tension in the air, thick like fog, wrapping around us, suffocating our resolve. Honor above all, he murmured to himself, as if trying to convince the part of him that still believed in those words. But in his gaze, I saw the flicker of rebellion, a chance to break free from the chains of expectation that bound him. The enemy lunged forward, and time fractured again. I sprang into action, drawing my sword, the steel a gleam of hope amidst the encroaching darkness. My heart thundered, each beat like a war drum, echoing the battle between duty and desire, fear and courage. "Stand back!" I roared, and with each swing of my weapon, I felt the pulse of chivalry shift, tremble, and finally crack. It was no longer a noble code, it was raw, visceral, a raging storm that sought to tear everything apart. Elena's cry reverberated in my chest, a haunting melody of love and fear. "Don't," she pleaded, her voice a lifeline threading through the chaos. "You can't let this consume you." But was it too late? Was it even possible to separate the ideals from the man? And then, Cedric stepped forward, a gladiator in the arena of a war that was both ancient and new. He drew his sword, the blade catching the flicker of the flames, illuminating his face, a mask of determination and despair. "No more," he spoke, voice steady, heavy with resolve. "Tonight, we rewrite the code." The enemy fell like a shadow cast upon the ground, and in that fleeting instant, as the world spun on its axis, I realized that chivalry was no longer an abstract concept, but a living, breathing entity, full of contradictions and chaos. It wasn't just about honor or valor, it was the love that ignited the fire within us, the darkness we battled, and the connections that bound us. As we stood together, raw and unrefined, I felt the weight of the world shift, the very fabric of chivalry unraveling before us. This was our moment, a chaotic tableau of passion and pain, love and loss. Honor, I would come to understand, was not merely a code etched in stone, but a living, pulsating thing, and we were its guardians, forever entwined in its complexity. And so, with hearts ablaze and shadows closing in, we faced the uncertainty of the night, prepared to challenge the very essence of what it meant to be a knight. A new dawn awaited, one painted in shades of blood and love, where chivalry would forge its own path. Each heartbeat resonated with the promise of what was to come. A lingering tension hung in the air, a whispered invitation to a future unwritten, but inextricably tied to the choices we made in the darkness. The night was heavy, a thick cloak draped over the castle's ancient stones, where ghosts of valor and betrayal whispered through the halls. Rain drummed against the slate roof, each drop a heartbeat, a reminder of the fragile truce between honor and desire. I stood in the shadows of the great hall, my heart racing, my hands trembling as I clutched the hilt of my sword. Sir Edmund had a reputation, a knight whose deeds were sung in taverns, but tonight, as I watched him pace like a caged lion, the glimmer of his armor felt more like chains than honor. "Fate is a fickle mistress," he muttered, his voice low, reverberating off the cold stone walls. The flickering light of the torches cast a dance of shadows, illuminating the torment etched on his face. To serve one's lady is to court madness. There it was, the truth, raw and unyielding. The chivalric code, that lofty ideal of gallantry and virtue, had become a noose around his neck. And there was me, a quivering reflection of my own aspirations, my mind a maelstrom of doubt and longing. I had always romanticized knighthood, the tales of loyalty and bravery wrapping around my heart like a comforting quilt, but now, I felt the suffocation of the ideal. I wasn't a hero, I was a fool, caught in the web of a narrative spun by poets and dreamers. "You think honor will shield you?" I whispered, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "The heart knows no code." His eyes flared, a storm brewing, and for a moment, I saw past the polished exterior. Behind the armor, the man was a tempest of regrets and unfulfilled dreams. "And yet I am sworn to it," he replied, his voice trembling with frustration. "There is a lady, and she is in peril." To abandon my vows, his voice trailed off, but the weight of his oath hung like a guillotine above us. The tension crackled, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and unspoken truths. I could see the flicker of doubt in his eyes, the torment of a man caught between the fire of fidelity and the icy grip of reality. How many hearts had been crushed under the weight of such oaths, I wondered, as I thought of Lady Isolde, the one who held his heart captive, a woman with dreams of her own, shackled by the expectations of a world that valued honor over happiness. "Do you love her?" The question slipped out, heart pounding as if daring fate to answer. The silence that followed was deafening, filled with the echoes of lost aspirations and stolen moments. He turned, and for a heartbeat, I thought he might shatter, the dam of his emotions threatening to break. To love is a betrayal to the code, he finally said, the words sharp as arrows, yet they carried the weight of unacknowledged longing. I remember when love was a battle of wills, when I believed the heart could conquer all. The memory swept over me, vivid and haunting, the laughter of youth and the ache of dreams. But dreams have a way of twisting into nightmares. I thought of the stories we told ourselves, the knights charging into battles, the damsels waiting with bated breath. It was all a facade, a beautiful illusion that crumbled under the weight of reality. The shadows seemed to stretch, and the room felt alive, pulsing with the tension between us. Outside, the storm raged, a reflection of the turmoil brewing within. You wear your honor like a shroud, I said, desperate to cut through the darkness. You think it will protect you? It is a veil that blinds you to what truly matters. The words hung in the air, a challenge, an invitation to break free from the chains of expectation. Edmund's gaze hardened, and I could see the flicker of rebellion beneath the surface. You speak as if love has no price, he spat, anger sparking a fire in his chest. What of loyalty? What of the vows we take? They demand sacrifice. Sacrifice? Or suffering? I shot back, my voice rising, the emotional tide threatening to overflow. Honor has become a prison, a gilded cage where our hearts rot from neglect. The chivalric code, you think it's noble? It's a farce. A game we play while the world crumbles around us. My words hung there, raw and bleeding, yet I felt the fierce pull of something deeper, a shared hunger for a reality beyond the constraints of our roles. And then, it happened. A shattering moment when the walls we built around our hearts began to crack. What if, I whispered, the storm outside echoing my turmoil, what if we chose to redefine what honor means? Not as a chain, but as a choice, a path to true freedom. Edmund's eyes softened, the storm within him quieting, if only for an instant. A choice? To forsake my lady, my vows. The very idea sent tremors through him, but I could see the flicker of hope, the glimmer of a new possibility. The air crackled with potential, the tension palpable, as we stood on the precipice of transformation. But in that electrifying silence, the shadows of our past loomed large. The echoes of others who had walked this path before us haunted the air. They had chosen love, had dared to defy the whispers of the code, only to find themselves alone, their hearts shattered by betrayal. The ghosts lingered, specters of caution and fear, reminding us of the stakes. And yet, as the storm continued its relentless assault, I caught a glimpse of something unspeakable, a flicker of rebellion in Edmund's eyes, the promise of a new dawn. What if we let go? What if we bared our souls to the world, unencumbered by the weight of expectation? The castle stood silent around us, a testament to the struggles of the heart, entangled in the fabric of duty and desire. I felt the pull of possibility, the heady rush of a choice unmade that could change everything. This was not merely a battle of knights and ladies, this was the arena of the heart, a tempest of emotions threatening to drown us or set us free. As the wind howled outside, I knew that we were on the brink of something profound, a confrontation with our own truths, and the world outside would never be the same. Above us, the clock tower chimed, marking the passage of time, an ominous reminder that the night was far from over, and the choice lay ahead, tantalizingly close yet perilously distant. The code had served us well, but at what cost? The ghosts of our past whispered, urging us forward, into the unknown. In that moment, we were more than knights or ladies, we were souls poised on the edge of reinvention, ready to carve our own path through the darkness, where love and honor could finally coexist in the light. The storm raged on, but within us, a new dawn was stirring, vibrant and alive, waiting to break free. The clash of steel rang like the toll of a death knell, echoing through the darkened courtyard as a knight, his armor battered and tarnished, fell to his knees, blood pooling around him, a crimson halo marking the ground. I remember the sound of his armor, each scrape a whisper of 1,000 battles fought, of loyalty betrayed and honor lost. The moon hung high, a silent observer in the night sky, its pale light illuminating faces twisted in terror or glee, depending on the heart that wore the mask. Please, he gasped, desperation warping his voice. I served. But it was a cry swallowed whole by the shadows, the darkness ready to consume him, oblivion as his only reward. The onlookers, cloaked in the dark garb of commoners or the finery of lords, felt the weight of his plea pressing down on their chests, an existential dread that knew no boundaries. The knights stood apart, their eyes reflecting the flickering torches, but their hearts were closed, locked away behind gilded walls of privilege. Knights, they bore the title, the honor, the armor, but not all were equal. And there I stood, watching, heart racing, caught in the whirlwind of the moment, surrounded by menacing power plays and the aching cries of the fallen. I could almost hear the clock ticking away the fleeting moments of justice. Tick. Tack. The rhythm of fate was relentless. In that chaos, I felt a hand grip my arm, a frail yet determined grasp that pulled me from my reverie. It was Ellie's, her eyes a tempest of stormy grey, reflecting a lifetime of lessons learned in the shadow of those armored giants. She was not a knight, nor would she ever be. But her spirit? Unyielding. "We must go," she urged, her voice a furious whisper, the urgency clawing at her throat. "He's not the first, and he won't be the last." Her words hung heavy, tethered to the anguish that seeped into my very bones. "Not all knights were born equal," I echoed, my own voice a mere spectre in the air. "Not all deserve the title." Ellis's gaze darted to the courtyard, her heart torn. "But what can we do?" It hung between us, the unspoken truth. There was no armor to protect the brave, no shield to guard the innocent. We were but shadows on the periphery of a world governed by ruthless hierarchy. The towering figures of the nobles stood like iron statues, proud, aloof, unyielding. They wore their rank as a crown, laughing at the misfortunes of those below, their laughter sharp as a blade, cutting through the air with a sickening ease. The knight on the ground, doomed to be a mere footnote in their tales, had been a common soldier once, yearning for glory but stripped of dignity in his last moments. I remember how the sun would rise every morning, gilding the world in gold, but this night, it felt like the universe itself wept. Ellis's hand slipped from my arm, and I watched her walk toward the knight, her silhouette framed by the flames, a stark contrast to the cold indifference around us. "You don't have to die alone," she murmured, but the knight's eyes were glazed, his body faltering. Would he even hear her? Would it matter? "Ellis!" I cried, panic rising like bile in my throat. I could see the nobles shifting, their amusement waning, their attention drawn to the scene unfolding. The laughter faded, replaced by an unsteady silence that felt too heavy, too charged with consequence. "Leave him!" I shouted, desperation lacing my words, yet I knew it was futile. The moment had stretched, an eternity of indecision wrapped around us like a noose. "I can't," she snapped back, fire igniting in her soul. "What kind of world are we living in? If we turn our backs now, we are no better than they are." The knight's struggles grew weaker, I could see the light in his eyes flicker, dimming against the encroaching darkness. With every labored breath he took, I felt my own heart tremble in response. It felt as though time itself was mocking us, spinning faster, unyielding. In that moment, I was struck by the absurdity of it all, the very concept of knighthood twisted into a grotesque parody. They bathed once a year, sure, and yet here they were, clothed in filth and pride, believing themselves superior to a man on his knees. What a cruel joke! The ghosts of hope and despair danced around us, spectral witnesses to our indecision, our terror. Ellis knelt beside the knight, and I could see her trembling hands reaching for his, a pitiful attempt to bridge the chasm of social status that separated them. "You are not alone," she whispered fiercely, a mantra drowning out the chaos around us. "You are worth fighting for." The knight's gaze flickered to hers, recognition, perhaps, glimmered for a fleeting moment. Then the laughter of the noble elite grew louder, drowning out the beacon of humanity that Ellis had ignited. Shadows consumed the light, and I felt an icy knot form in my stomach, fear coiling tightly. But within that fear lay a spark of rage, a desire for change that coursed through me like fire. I remembered nights spent in the glow of embers, the tales of valor and sacrifice that spoke of equality, of knights who fought not for titles but for the very soul of those they protected. I felt the weight of 1,000 voices, the cries of the oppressed echoing in my mind. And there it was, the confrontation, the epiphany, the tipping point. I too reached for the knight, my hand brushing against Ella's as we formed a fragile union in the face of overwhelming odds, a testament to the bond forged in the fires of shared struggle. "We won't let you go," I vowed, my voice trembling with the weight of our shared purpose. But the laughter of the nobles echoed through the night, a chilling reminder of the power they wielded. We were nothing but shadows against their glaring light, destined to be forgotten. Yet in that moment, as the night gasped for breath, as Ella's spirit blazed bright, I felt the world shift, if only for an instant. The clock continued to tick, a relentless march toward an uncertain fate. I had no answers, no promises, only the knowledge that we were all bound by the fragile threads of our existence, tangled in a web of status and worth, yet yearning for something more profound, something that reached beyond the surface. I remember the heartbeats, the gasps, the overwhelming desire to scream against the chains that bound us. The tension hung in the air, electric, ready to ignite at any moment. Time blurred, and in that space between breaths, I knew, deep within my soul, that the fight was far from over. The shadows of the past loomed large, and the future shimmered just out of reach, the haunting reminder that not all knights were equal, but all had a story worth telling. And as the night fell into silence, the echoes of our resolve lingered, unsaid yet palpable, an unbreakable bond forged in the fires of injustice. The night was far from over, it was only the beginning. The clang of steel echoed like thunder beneath the velvet shroud of night, sharp enough to slice through the air and prick at the hearts of all who dared to listen. A dark figure stood at the edge of the clearing, surrounded by the flickering shadows of trees that twisted and turned, longing for the moonlight but forever shunned. Sir Cedric, his armor battered and dented, could taste the metallic tang of blood on his lips as he gripped his sword tighter. He wasn't just fighting for his life. He was battling the very structure that had raised him, an oppressive hierarchy that weighed down the souls of those like him. Each breath was a reminder of the disparities that cut deeper than any sword. "I remember the laughter," he murmured, his voice breaking against the haunting silence. The laughter of the knights feasting while the villagers starved. The wine flowed like a river, while we drank from the troughs. The memory stung more than the wounds on his back, a cruel irony that danced like ghosts around him. Cedric had spent years polishing the armor of the privileged, but tonight, he felt the weight of that same armor pressing down on his chest. Across the clearing, Lady Eleonora, her gown tattered but her spirit unyielding, watched the scene unfold. She had witnessed the plights of the serfs, their hollow eyes, the despair that clung to them like a shroud. She felt their pain as if it were a living thing, gnawing at her insides. "We are all puppets in a cruel play," she thought, her heart pounding like a war drum. But tonight, I refused to be a marionette for their amusement. The air was thick with tension, and she could almost hear the whispers of her ancestors urging her to rise above the shackles of her lineage. "Eleonora," a voice called, sharp as a dagger, slicing through her resolve. It was Sir Alaric, a knight who wore loyalty like a badge but whose heart beat for power. "You can't interfere. This is our battle." He was caught in the web of tradition, entangled in the very system that had raised him, a system that promised glory but delivered only despair. "You were born to serve, lady. Know your place." Yet even as he spoke, doubt flickered in his eyes, for he too had tasted the bitterness of injustice. Against the backdrop of a world crumbling under the weight of its own greed, Cedric charged forward, sword raised, the clash of metal like a symphony of chaos. Each swing of his weapon felt like a cry for the voiceless, a desperate attempt to cut through the layers of indifference that surrounded them. "I fight for the forgotten," he bellowed into the night, a wild man possessed, his spirit a raging fire against the cold winds of betrayal. The knights, their laughter now turned to roars of outrage, drew their swords, their faces masked by the arrogance of privilege. "I remember," Cedric's voice was a whisper now, choked with emotion. "I remember the boy who stole bread from the baker's stall, only to be hanged for his sins. All for a crust." Each word dripped with the weight of memories, tainted by the knowledge that justice was a luxury reserved for the powerful. The emptiness in his chest was an echo chamber for the cries of the oppressed, their voices melding into a haunting refrain that refused to let him go. Eleonora stepped forward, heart racing, caught between the knight's frantic display of loyalty and the silent plea of the people. "What do you fight for, Alaric?" she asked, her tone a mixture of challenge and desperation. For your honor? Or for the comfort of your seat at the table? His eyes flared with anger, yet behind the fury, a flicker of uncertainty danced. She was a storm threatening to unearth the foundations of his beliefs, and for a moment, he faltered. Don't let her sway you, a voice hissed, the tension thick as fog. It belonged to Lord Graham, the puppet master pulling the strings, his own hunger for power insatiable. The structure is sacred. Without it, we are nothing. But Eleanora wasn't nothing. She was a glimpse of hope, a spark of rebellion lighting the path toward change. She had seen the suffering in the eyes of the peasants, and now she saw it reflected in her own. Cedric, wild with fury, caught sight of the Lord. You're a ghost haunting the living, he shouted, charging at Graham, rage propelling him forward. With each step, he felt the weight of generations on his shoulders, the echoes of dreams deferred and lives crushed beneath the wheel of injustice. The air crackled with energy, thick as the dread that settled into the bones of those who lived under the tyranny of the elite. The clash was inevitable. Steel met steel, a cacophony of clanging metal, the cries of men caught in a tempest of their own making. Cedric felt the adrenaline pulse through him, each heartbeat drumming a rhythm that spoke of sacrifice, of the fragile line between oppression and liberation. He fought not just for himself, but for the lost souls who had been silenced, those whose dreams had turned to dust beneath the weight of the crown. Fight, Cedric! Eleanora urged, her voice a beacon in the chaos. Fight for us all. The moment hung in the air, thick with anticipation, the universe holding its breath, waiting to see if this night would birth a revolution or bury it beneath the rubble of tradition. In the midst of the clash, they were all warriors, knights, lords, and ladies, each moved by a desire as primal as the earth itself, a longing to break free from the chains that bound them. Cedric, Alaric, Eleanora, their fates entwined like the roots of ancient trees, each grappling with the weight of their choices, the suffocating grip of expectation. And as the stars blinked down, indifferent to the turmoil below, the clock ticked on, a reminder that time was relentless. The night was far from over, and the battle that raged was merely the prologue to a saga that would echo through the ages, a tale of hearts ignited by fire, of souls seeking justice in a world unyielding, of a moment where the hierarchy would tremble and the disparities would dare to face the light. With the dawn still a whisper on the horizon, the stage was set, the players unknowing but resolute. Each heart beat as one, pulse igniting a revolution that would not be silenced. No conclusions drawn, no endings in sight, just an eternal unfolding of chaos and hope, spiraling toward the next act that awaited in the shadows. The clash of metal echoed in the night like a distant thunderstorm, a reminder of the chaos that had erupted just beyond the castle walls. I stood there, shaking, clutching the hilt of my sword, the cold steel biting into my palm, grounding me in that very moment. My breath came in ragged gasps, a stark contrast to the rhythmic thud of war drums drumming against the backdrop of twilight. The banners flapped like restless spirits, and in that eerie silence just before the storm broke, I could feel the weight of knighthood creeping into my bones. Do you hear that? Thomas's voice trembled, barely louder than a whisper. He was my squire, barely 16, his eyes wide with the terror of impending battle. What if we're not ready? His youthful bravado wavered like the flickering torchlight that illuminated our faces. The boy had dreams, bright and shimmering, of glory and honor. But tonight, dreams felt heavy, burdened by the shackles of reality. I remembered my own dreams once. I had envisioned myself as a gallant knight, armor gleaming, riding into the sunset, a champion of the realm. But that image shattered like glass the moment I realized the truth of it all. Knighthood was not gilded armor and noble quests, it was a crushing weight of debt and obligation, a relentless cycle of expectation that threatened to swallow us whole. In the shadows of the courtyard, I could see the flicker of torches illuminating the grim faces of my fellow knights, each one grappling with their own demons. Sir Alaric, his brow furrowed, weighed down by the burden of his family's legacy, an estate crumbling under the weight of unpaid taxes and endless feasts. The laughter of the court had faded into a haunting echo, replaced by the relentless clink of coins that never seemed to fill the coffers. Do you think they'll notice if we don't show? I asked, though I knew my voice trembled with uncertainty. The weight of knighthood felt heavier than the armor I wore. I felt the ghost of my father's expectations wrap around me like a vice, squeezing until I could scarcely breathe. What happens if we fail? Thomas stared into the distance, his youthful face drawn tight with fear and hope. If we don't fight, they'll take everything, he whispered. They'll take our lands, our horses, even our dreams. His eyes glistened with the light of my own fears. How had I become the very thing I'd loathed, a pawn in a game of power and privilege? As the drums grew louder, I recalled the day I was given this title, a moment that should have filled my heart with pride. The grand hall, filled with nobles and lords, the lavish banquet laid out like a feast for kings. But all I could think of were the debts that loomed over my head like a dark cloud, threatening to wash away whatever honor this title had once bestowed. I remember the day I was knighted, I said, my voice barely above a murmur, dragging the memory from the depths. I stood before the king, and he placed the sword on my shoulder, and I felt nothing. No glory, just the weight of expectation. I glanced at Thomas, and for a moment, we were both lost in that memory, like two ghosts tethered to a past that haunted us. I thought I would be a hero, turns out I'm just another debtor in a long line of them. Is that what it's come to? He asked, the innocence still flickering in his gaze. Do we fight for nothing but coins and land? Not just coins, I replied, bitterness seeping into my words. Loyalty, honor, family, these are the currencies we trade in. But the balance never tips in our favor. The wind howled around us, a mournful song of lost dreams, cutting through the fabric of the night. I could hear the faint cries of the wounded echoing in the distance, mingling with the clashing steel. In that moment, a visceral fear gripped me, squeezing my heart like a vice. Would we be anything more than shadows of men, puppets dancing on strings pulled by the greed of those who never fought? And then there was Alizia, the lady of the castle, her heart a fragile bloom in a world of thorns. She had dreams of her own, but they were trapped beneath the weight of alliances and arranged marriages. I watched her from the corner of my eye as she clutched a tapestry, her fingers trembling against the fabric. The stories woven within it were blood-red, staining her every hope. Sir Cedric, she called, her voice a siren song, drawing me in. Will you save us? The question hung in the air, heavy as lead. Save them? I could barely save myself. Each knight's blade felt like a shackle, binding me to a life of servitude and sacrifice. But the spark of rebellion ignited in my chest, fueled by the injustice of it all. I'll do what I can, I promised, though the words tasted bitter on my tongue. As the first trumpet sounded, signaling the charge, I felt an overwhelming wave of despair. We were not knights tonight, we were debtors, bound by chains of expectation and the weight of our own greed. I could see Thomas beside me, his youthful face steeling itself against the darkness to come. Remember, I whispered, the words barely escaping my lips, we fight not for glory, but for each other. I reached out, clasping his shoulder, the warmth of hope flickering between us like a flame. But even as I spoke, I could feel the cold fingers of doubt wrapping around me. What if we lost? What if knighthood was nothing more than a graveyard of broken dreams? The battleground loomed like a spectre, a dark abyss of flesh and metal, ready to swallow us whole. And as we charged into that darkness, hearts pounding like war drums, I knew one thing for certain, every clash of steel, every cry of despair, every heartbeat would echo not just for the sake of knighthood, but for the whispered dreams that lingered in the shadows, waiting for their moment to breathe. The clang of metal reverberated through the air, sharp as the jagged edges of a broken heart. I stood there, the chill creeping into my bones, watching the smoke rise like a ghost from the battlefield. Bodies lay strewn about, lifeless figures that once held dreams of honor and chivalry. I could see them, hearts that once beat with hope, now silent. Each fallen knight was a sacrifice, a hefty toll that weighed heavy on the shoulders of those still standing, unyielding yet trembling with the enormity of their choices. I remember the first time I donned my armor, my brother's hand clasping my shoulder, firm yet trembling. You wear this for honor, he said, but his eyes told another story. Honor was a ghost hunt, intangible, fleeting, a wisp of smoke in the night. The weight of the steel pressed into my skin, each piece an anchor pulling me deeper into the abyss. It wasn't just the armor, the sword, the shield, the horse, all symbols of valor that came at a price beyond gold coins and glittering jewels. Each clink of metal echoed the sacrifices yet to come, the blood and sweat that would pave my path. And then there was Alizia, my heart's quiet storm, her laughter ringing like silver bells in a cathedral of shadows. She was the only light in this world of darkness, yet her light flickered, threatened by the weight of my ambition. "You can't be a knight and a man of love," she warned, her voice trembling like a leaf in the wind. But how could I tell her that every time I strapped on that armor, I felt another piece of my soul slip away? I remember the day I first rode into battle, the sun blazing down like 1,000 judgmental eyes, and the sounds of war thrumming in my veins. I thought glory awaited me, but all I found was the bitter taste of ash and regret. I was not the hero of the story, I was a pawn, a tool used by lords whose names I didn't even know, driven by ambition and greed. I swung my sword, blood splattering against my armor, yet all I could hear was Alizia's laughter turning into a scream, caught in the chaos. The cost of knighthood was not just measured in gold. Each piece of equipment was a gamble, a sword that could shatter an enemy's skull, yet also the blade that could slice through the fragile threads of life. A horse that galloped with the strength of 1,000 storms but could also buck its rider into oblivion. Land, the ultimate prize, was a double-edged sword. It could nourish and sustain, or it could become a graveyard of dreams, where hopes withered like vines in the winter frost. I remember the night spent in the tavern, my fingers tracing the rim of a tankard, the laughter and the clinking of glasses, a facade that masked the gnawing emptiness inside. To be a knight is to be a fool, I'd joke, but the mirth never reached my soul. I watched the smiles mask the truth, felt the weight of ambition bearing down on my chest, squeezing out breath and joy. Each toast was a reminder of debts unpaid, of lives shattered, of the silent screams of the fallen. Then came the day of reckoning. Alizia stood before me, fierce as a tempest, her eyes blazing with an intensity that burned through the fog of my confusion. "You can choose, you know," she said, her voice steady like the ground beneath our feet. "You can be a knight or you can be a man." The words sliced through me, deep and raw, and I felt the armor I wore begin to suffocate. The cost of knighthood was heavier than I had ever imagined. I could hear the whispers of my comrades, their voices like phantoms in the night. "You must protect your land, your title, your name." But at what price? I could feel the shadows creeping in, suffocating the light, the laughter fading into a haunting silence where only regret lingered. Every knight had his demons, but mine took the form of memories, a tapestry of choices and consequences woven with blood. I saw my brother among the fallen, a glimmer of laughter in his eyes now replaced by despair. He had chased glory, too, and it had devoured him whole. The taste of iron filled my mouth as I fought back the memories, but they clung to me, wrapping tighter with every breath. I remember the night I lost myself, the sound of clashing swords ringing in my ears, the stench of sweat and fear mingling in the air. Alizia's words echoed like a mantra, calling me back to the surface. "Choose love, choose life." But I was trapped in a cycle of bloodshed, the horizon painted with the remnants of my choices, the land I fought for stained with lives lost and futures shattered. And so I stood, a knight on the brink, the weight of my armor pressing down like 1,000 regrets. I had choices to make, lives to save, and yet the haunting spectre of ambition loomed large. The battlefield stretched before me, a canvas of chaos painted with strokes of despair and courage. I felt the chill of uncertainty creeping in, and the shadows whispered secrets I dared not confront. Each heartbeat was a countdown, a reminder of the price I had already paid and the costs yet to come. The ghosts of past choices loomed over me, their silent screams echoing in the depths of my soul. Alizia's fierce spirit flickered in my mind. Would I choose her, or remain a prisoner to this unholy quest for honor? I took a step forward, the ground beneath me trembling, a knight, a man, a soul caught between two worlds. My heart raced, anticipation and fear intertwining like ivy around a crumbling wall. The night was thick with promise and peril, and I felt the urge to run, to escape this path that led only to heartbreak. But the call of duty resonated deep within, a haunting melody that I couldn't ignore. And as the stars blinked above, I stood on the brink of reckoning, a mere mortal bearing the weight of 1,000 dreams, a night torn between ambition and love, with the battlefield stretching infinitely before me, a promise of chaos and a whisper of redemption. I remember the thunderous silence that wrapped around me, swallowing the voices, the laughter, the world alive with colors and sounds. It was the kind of quiet that pressed against your chest, a vacuum where nothing existed, just the pounding of my heart. It was as if the universe held its breath, teetering on the edge of something magnificent or catastrophic. I was standing in a dimly lit room, the walls closing in like a trap. Shadows curled in the corners, whispering secrets that tightened around my throat. Thomas stood beside me, his eyes wide, haunted by memories he couldn't shake off. He was a war veteran, the kind who wore his scars like medals, though they were etched on his mind instead of his skin. The ghosts of battles long past floated in the air between us, their cold fingers gripping his shoulders, pulling him back into the darkness. "You can't leave me," he whispered, voice shaking, a raw plea that shattered the silence. "I can't face them alone." I wanted to tell him that he wasn't alone, that I was here, breathing in tandem with him, but the words died in my throat, choked by fear. Because I knew his demons were relentless, and they didn't care about me or my promises. They were shadows from a time that refused to fade, relentless memories that clawed at his sanity. Across the room, Lucy sat on the floor, her back against the wall, arms wrapped around her knees like she was trying to hold herself together. She was a mother, a survivor of unspeakable loss, a woman whose laughter had once filled rooms and now echoed like a ghostly whisper. The weight of her grief hung in the air, thick and suffocating, like the humidity before a storm. I remember, her voice was brittle, cracking like dry leaves. I remember when I thought I could protect them. She rocked slightly, a rhythmic motion that felt both desperate and comforting. But it didn't matter. It never matters. Each word was a dagger, sharp and piercing. I felt their sharpness as they sliced through the air, settling deep in my chest. I could almost taste the bitterness of regret, the tang of sorrow that clung to her like a second skin. Her memories were a labyrinth I couldn't navigate, her pain a river that threatened to drown us all. "Lucy," I said, but the name felt heavy on my tongue. "You don't have to carry this alone." I reached out, the space between us crackling with unspoken fears, but she recoiled as if my words were a flame she couldn't bear to touch. "I've lost everything," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, a confession that echoed in the hollow of the room. "What's left of me is just a shell. I'm tired of fighting." A shiver raced down my spine, a reflection of her hopelessness. The walls felt closer, the shadows darker, and I could feel the grip of despair tightening around my throat. I could sense the weight of her loss, a dark fog that seeped into my very core. I wanted to scream, to shake both of them and demand they see the light. This was not the end. But the words caught in my throat, tangled with my own fears. Thomas trembled, his hands balled into fists as if he were fighting against invisible foes. "You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to come back and find a world that didn't care?" His voice rose, jagged and raw. "I didn't ask for the nightmares, for the shadows that crawl into my bed at night, whispering truths I can't bear to face." I felt each word like a physical blow, the pain and anger radiating from him, reverberating through the stillness. His eyes burned with a fury that came from a deep well of anguish, and I realized he was grappling with a truth more terrifying than the ghosts of war, the truth of a society that turns its back, that fails to see the scars of those who bleed inside. I glanced back at Lucy, whose eyes shimmered with unshed tears, reflecting a world of pain that I couldn't begin to comprehend. "We're all broken," I murmured, and the weight of my own confession hung in the air, a heavy shroud that threatened to suffocate us. "But maybe it's okay to be broken together." Their eyes turned to me, a flicker of something, hope, fear, desperation, flashing across their faces. I realized that in this moment, we were not just victims of our trauma. We were survivors, united in our scars. The room pulsed with a strange energy, a collective heartbeat that thrummed between us. "Tell me," Lucy's voice quivered, a fragile thread with the power to unravel or bind. "Tell me it gets better." The silence thickened, the enormity of our shared pain stretching into the corners of the room like shadows. I wanted to promise her the sun would rise, that the darkness would fade, but the truth loomed over us like a specter. I took a breath, feeling the air burn in my lungs. "I don't know if it gets better, but I know it matters that we're here, that we face it together." I could see the flicker of understanding, a tentative connection forming. And in that moment, amidst the swirling chaos of our fears, we began to break the silence. I heard the whispers of our pasts intertwining, weaving a tapestry of pain and resilience. Each confession was a thread, pulling us closer, binding us together in our shared struggle. "Do you remember?" Thomas started, and his voice, once trembling with fear, now held a new weight. "Do you remember the first day we thought we were invincible?" Lucy nodded, wiping a tear away, and her eyes glimmered with something like recognition. "I remember," she said softly, her voice steadying. "I remember the dreams we had," and as they spoke, the shadows receded just a fraction, retreating into the corners, unwilling to let go entirely but allowing a sliver of light through. Each word breathed life into the silence, and slowly, painfully, we began to stitch the fragmented pieces of our hearts back together, one whispered memory at a time. The darkness was still there, lurking, but now it seemed to blend with the faint glow of hope, creating a tapestry of what was and what could be. But the night was far from over, and outside, the world continued to spin, indifferent and relentless, as we wrestled with our truths in the dim light of our room. The clang of steel ringing against steel, the ground shuddering beneath the weight of armored men, the acrid scent of blood and sweat mingling with the damp earth, it is all a symphony of chaos. The battlefield is alive, a beast roaring ferociously under a leaden sky. I stand amidst this storm, breath quickening, pulse racing, heart pounding against my ribs like a prisoner desperate for freedom. My name? It flickers like a dying candle in the dark. But this is no time for names. This is war. "Keep your shield up," a voice shouts, but it seems muffled, drowning beneath the cries of men, friends turned ghosts, their faces twisted in agony. I remember the first time I felt terror swell in my throat, a jagged stone lodged where my heart used to be. I remember how the warmth of courage turned cold, how it shivered away in the face of death. The air is thick with memories, phantoms of past battles swirling around me. Each clash of sword against sword echoes in my mind long after the last enemy has fallen. I still see their faces, the wild eyes of an enemy I was trained to kill, the blood on my hands, hot and sticky, forever staining me with shadows. I am Sir Alaric, yet I am also a collection of fragments, each fight, each scream, seeping into my very being, leaving me hollow. I glance over at my brother-in-arms, Cedric. His gaze is distant, yet sharp, as if he watches a battle that no one else can see. He wears a mask of bravado, yet there's a tremor in his hands, a slight hitch in his breath. I have seen him laugh and drink, reveling in our victories, but now, he slumps against the ruins of what once was a proud castle, the stone walls crumbling like his sanity. "I can't remember," he whispers, and the way his voice breaks sends a shard of ice through my chest. What is the point of victory when it all fades into darkness? The night after our most recent clash, we sit in the flickering glow of a fire. Shadows dance grotesquely on the walls, and I can almost see the faces of those we lost, mocking us, haunting us. "You ever wonder what it's like to be a ghost?" I say, trying to pierce the suffocating silence. Cedric looks at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and understanding. "Every night," he replies, voice barely above a whisper. "They come for me." I want to scream that they come for me too, that their whispers curl around my thoughts, dragging me down into the abyss. But instead, I laugh. It feels wrong, absurd. "Well, at least you've got company," I say, attempting to mask the deepening shadows of despair clawing at my throat. I'm just the lone rider, lost in the dark. Memories flicker like the firelight. I recall the laughter of the nights before the battles, tales spun with bravado, chivalry woven into every drink, every shared story. But now I see the cost, those tales are haunted, coated in nightmare. For every victory, there's a night spent wide awake, heart racing, listening for the sounds of each darkened corner where echoes of swords clash, where the lost are forever caught in a cycle of torment. I remember too much. I remember the way the moonlight glinted off blood-soaked armor, how it made the world seem ethereal while the ground beneath me was soaked in the reality of death. I remember the final breaths of men whose lives flickered out like candles extinguished by the wind. Cedric leans closer, a fierce intensity igniting in his eyes. "What do you do when you can't escape the past?" he asks. I can feel his pain wash over me, a tide of despair pulling me under. "You fight it," I say, though the words feel hollow. You fight every damn day. But what is fighting, when every clash with an enemy comes with its own ghosts, its own price? The fire crackles, and I see a flicker of flames mirrored in his gaze. You think they'll ever let us go? He asks, and my heart clenches. The weight of his question hangs heavy, suffocating. No, I whisper, for the truth is a cruel beast, gnashing its teeth at the edges of our sanity. And then, in the stillness, it hits me, what we have fought for is not the glory of our names written in tales, but the battle for our minds, for peace amid chaos. We are knights, yes, but more than that, we are men fractured by the weight of our own deeds. Each scar on our bodies echoes a battle unwinnable, fights against shadows that cling to us like a second skin. I think of the time when the laughter came easy, when the world felt less like a battleground and more like a dance. Remember that tavern in the old city? I ask, the memory brightening the dark like a candle in the night. The one where they had that awful ale. Cedric chuckles, a sound that feels foreign yet welcome, like the first light of dawn piercing the veil of night. Yes, he breathes, nostalgia wrapping around us like a warm cloak. The one where we danced like fools, and I fell on my face in front of the barmaid. A brief smile, but in his eyes, the shadows linger. We are lost in the memory, a fragile escape from the truth that the battlefield is never far behind, the lingering taste of death still fresh on our tongues. But in that moment, I see a flicker of hope, perhaps we can find solace even amid the nightmares. But then the laughter fades, the weight presses down again, and the ghosts begin to stir. I grip my sword tighter, the steel cool against my palm, a reminder of the battle still to come. We fight, I whisper, but even I can hear the uncertainty in my voice. We fight, even when we can't remember why. The night stretches on, the fire dwindling, shadows creeping back into our hearts. We are bound, forever running from battles unseen, our minds a maze of fear and longing, a fight with no end in sight. Each breath feels heavy with the memories we carry, and in the silence, the war within us rages on, a tempest of despair and resilience entwined, unyielding, and alive. And just like that, the darkness whispers once more, the echoes of our souls entwined with the war, tempting us to succumb. But we stand. We stand and we fight, for there is still life to be lived, however fleeting, however painfully real. The castle loomed against the velvet night, an obsidian monolith punctuated only by flickering torches that cast shadows dancing like phantoms. Laughter echoed from the banquet hall within, a cacophony of mirth that felt achingly distant, as if the revelry were mocking the darkness outside. I stood at the edge of the courtyard, breath hanging in the air like a silent prayer, my heart thrumming in time with the distant music, a hypnotic rhythm that felt both intoxicating and suffocating. I remember when this place was a sanctuary. I remember its walls embracing me like a lover, the stone cool and reassuring. But tonight, the air crackled with anticipation, charged with the electric tension of secrets yet to be unveiled. Lysa, my sister, flitted through the crowd inside, her laughter cutting through the din like a knife. There she was, bright-eyed and free, unaware that the very elite she served were but vultures, circling, waiting for the moment to feast on her innocence. I clenched my fists, nails biting into my palms, a silent war waged within me, our protector against the very people who insisted I bow, but dared not touch my sister. Ferdinand! The shrill call sliced through the laughter. My blood turned to ice. Lord Cassian, a man cloaked in power and arrogance, had set his sights on her. I watched as he moved closer, his smile a thin veneer over predatory intent, and dread seeped into my bones like a winter chill. The nobles, resplendent in their finery, toasted to fortunes won and battles fought, while Lysa twirled, oblivious. I wanted to tear her away, to scream that they weren't her friends, they were her shackles, golden chains binding her to a fate she could not yet see. The walls of the banquet hall echoed with tales of chivalry and honor, but I knew the truth, honor was a currency exchanged only among the powerful while the weak suffered in silence. I stepped forward, but each movement felt like wading through treacle, heavy and thick with the weight of my own inadequacies. What can I do? I whispered into the night, the question lingering on my lips long after I spoke it. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept through the courtyard, tousling my hair, a reminder that I was alive and aching, a heartbeat away from everything unraveling. I could almost hear the whispers of the ghosts that haunted these stones, echoes of those who had come before, warriors and fools alike, all servants of an elite that cared little for the broken bodies left in their wake. Ferdinand! Lysa's voice cut through my reverie, bright as sunlight breaking through clouds, but it was tainted with the sweetness of danger. I turned, and there she was, radiant in a gown that shimmered like the night sky, yet her eyes betrayed a flicker of uncertainty. "Dance with me," she urged, pulling me toward the hall, her laughter like a melody that pulled at my heart. But my feet felt leaden. In that moment, I was not the knight I had dreamt of being. I was a coward, a boy lost in the machinations of a cruel world. "Lysa, please," I implored, my voice barely above a whisper. "You don't understand." "This isn't," her laughter halted, and the weight of her gaze pinned me like a butterfly on display. "You think I don't understand? You think I'm just a pretty ornament for them to admire?" Her voice quivered, and I felt it, a fracture, a crack in the porcelain facade. She was fragile, yet fierce, and I was 2 steps away from breaking her to save her. The laughter resumed behind us, a tidal wave of sound crashing against the walls, drowning out our fears, our truths. Lord Cassian emerged, gliding through the crowd, his smile honed to a razor's edge. "Ah, the noble knight," he called, arrogance dripping from his words. "Care to join us in celebration?" My heart clenched. The spectre of violence shimmered on the edges of my vision. "I serve only my sister," I shot back, every syllable a blade. Gasps rippled through the crowd, eyes darted, the nobles suddenly still, caught between amusement and the thrill of impending conflict. "Such loyalty," Cassian mocked, his voice smooth as silk, yet laced with the promise of danger. A single step from him felt like a plunge into darkness, my sister's safety, my honor, held in the balance. He extended a hand toward Lysa, a gesture both inviting and sinister. "Join us, my dear. Let us celebrate your beauty." I could taste the bile rising in my throat. "She is not yours to command," I spat, fury igniting my insides. I stepped forward, but the hand of the past held me back, memories of a boy who had once believed in the chivalry of knighthood, now reduced to mere scraps of paper. Lysa stood, torn between loyalty and survival, her gaze flickering between Cassian's predatory grin and my desperate plea. "Ferdinand, I don't." The word burst from my lips, raw and torn. "You don't have to please them, Lysa. They are not your friends." The world around us faded, the laughter muted in the background, replaced by the drum of my heart, each beat a call to arms. I could feel the weight of every moment, a dance spiraling into a tempest, uncertainty swirling like the shadows at the castle's edge. In that instant, I was a knight and a brother, a protector forged in the fires of desperation, ready to confront the very elite I had once served. And yet, beneath the surface, I felt the ghost of my own aspiration smoldering, reminding me of the absurdity of our roles. "Remember," I thought bitterly, "they bathed once a year." So yes, romance was earthy. As the laughter echoed and shadows danced, the confrontation loomed like a storm on the horizon, the threads of our fates entwined, spiraling toward an uncertain climax. The night stretched before us, an infinite canvas of fear and desire, longing and despair, a tapestry bursting with the colors of our choices, the pulse of our hearts weaving a story that had only just begun. The clang of metal on metal rings through the damp air, a sound that vibrates in the marrow of every bone, a siren call that drowns out the murmur of the frightened crowd. I stand there, feeling the pulse of my heart echoing in my ears, a reminder of my own fragility amid the chaos. A knight, armored and shining, twisted with rage, faces down a lord whose laughter cuts through the tension like a knife. It is not joy that flickers in his eyes, but a twisted delight, a sick game played at the expense of honor and blood. "Kill him," someone screams, though the voice is drowned in the clamor. It's a command, not a plea. I think of Cedric, the knight once filled with dreams of glory, now reduced to a puppet in a farcical play of power, strung along by the whims of nobles who would sell their mothers for a sniff of political gain. He glances my way, his eyes pleading, a question hanging between us: am I a man or merely metal? I remember the day he told me of his dreams. "A knight," he said, his voice a hushed whisper, "is a protector, a shield for the innocent." But standing there, sweat mixing with the grime of battle, I see the truth in his eyes, a reflection of something darker. I am not just a witness, I am complicit. I remember that day, the sun shining high, and the smell of roasted meat wafting through the air as we prepared to serve our lords. How naive we were, thinking honor could fill our bellies. The nobles dance in their finery while we bleed. Their laughter is hollow, empty as their promises. I remember Lady Isolde, her beauty a stark contrast to the brutality around us. She was a flower among weeds, whispering sweet nothings to Cedric before he rode off to war, a war that was never his to fight. Her delicate fingers often toyed with a necklace, silver threads woven with their own secrets. "He'll come home," she said, her voice a soft hymn, but I saw the tremor beneath her resolve, the doubt lurking like a shadow in her eyes. "Is it fear that haunts you?" I asked once, teasing her with a playful nudge. "Or could it be the smell of desperation?" It was then she looked at me, really looked, and I saw the truth. "It's the men we send into battle who are the real pawns, don't you think?" Her laugh rang out, but it was tinged with sorrow, a bell tolling for the dead before they fell. And so they fall, one by one, each blow a reminder of our limitations, of their power. They serve as pawns for noble families, thrown into the fray like pieces on a chessboard, while the lords sip wine and plot their next move. A knight's life is not his own, I murmur, feeling the weight of the words. It belongs to the crown, the house, the ambition. My own heart sinks at the realization, a stone dropping into the depths of a dark well. Cedric lunges, and the air thickens with tension, each beat of my heart echoing his doubt. In that moment, I see him, not just a knight but a man caught in the throes of a struggle that is not his own. His armor is heavy, not with the weight of steel but with the burden of expectation, of loyalty twisted into shackles. He charges forward, and I can't help but recall Lady Isolde's eyes, shimmering with unshed tears, her dreams wrapped in his fate. "Free yourself," I whisper, though I know it is a futile hope. The battlefield is a stage, and the lords are the puppeteers, laughing in their gilded halls while sending us to die for their glory. I remember how I laughed, too, the absurdity of it all, how we thought we could escape the snare of fate with bravado, with swords raised high. Yet here we are, mere shadows in the grand tale of a cruel world. It's night now, and the moon hangs low, a ghostly witness to our struggle. The fight rages on, the cries of men mingling with the laughter of those who sit untouched by the chaos. Each clang of steel is a heartbeat, each fall of a knight a life extinguished. I can feel the weight of Cedric's sword in my own hands, the cold grip of power that never belonged to us. "Will you fight for them?" I ask, my voice barely a whisper, a question lost in the roar of battle. He hesitates, and in that moment, I see the flicker of doubt, the ghost of a man who once dreamed of honor. What is honor worth if it costs your soul? The lords watch, sipping from goblets filled with the blood of our brothers. I see them clearly now, smiling, whispering conspiracies, plotting our demise while we spill our blood for their amusement. In that brief silence, the world pauses, a moment of clarity amidst the madness. I see the strings, the puppet show laid bare. Our lives are tokens in a game, pieces meant to be sacrificed for the sake of power. And then, with a sudden explosion of sound, Cedric lunges forward. The world spins. His sword arcs through the air, glinting in the moonlight, and I feel something shatter within me. Is it hope? Or the last vestiges of our shared dreams? The truth is simple yet haunting. We are all pawns, caught in a web of desire and despair, trapped in a cycle of violence that feeds on our souls. As I watch him fight, I glimpse the ghosts of those who came before us, knights who dreamed, who loved, who bled for something greater. And the realization hits me like a thunderclap: love and loyalty are often the cruelest chains of all. I want to scream, but all that escapes is a choked breath, a prayer to the cosmos for mercy. The battle rages, the stakes rise higher, and I know where this is heading. I see Lady Isolde in my mind, waiting by the fire, her hands clutching her necklace, praying for Cedric's safe return. The irony cuts deep, her dreams draped in shadows of reality. He is fighting for her, yet it may cost him everything. And so it continues, like a haunting melody, a song of sacrifice echoing through the night. Each swing, each thrust, every drop of blood forging a path toward an uncertain end. Cedric is a warrior, but I see now he is a man trapped in a game where love and honor are mere whispers drowned out by ambition and betrayal. The moon watches, cold and indifferent, as we spiral towards our destinies. I feel the weight of history pressing down, a reminder that in the end, we are left with only our choices, the echoes of our hearts, and the shadows of those we leave behind. As the battle unfolds, I clutch the blade of fate, knowing that the next swing could either set us free or seal our doom. The game is not over, and we are far from finished. Silence hung thick in the air, heavy like the scent of smoke and blood. The wind screamed through the cracks in the stone walls, carrying whispers of forgotten names, of women whose voices had been snuffed out yet throbbed in the marrow of history. I could almost hear them, lost echoes swirling like ghosts in a darkened chamber. It was there, amidst the shadows, that I found Elena, her breath shallow, eyes wide with a feverish glint as if she were staring into the abyss, daring it to blink first. "Do you hear them?" she gasped, clutching my arm like a drowning woman clings to the last vestiges of hope. "They're calling for us. They know what we are." I remembered the stories, how they painted us, noble maidens waiting for brave knights, our worth measured by our beauty, our silence gilded in the innocence of youth. But the truth, oh the truth, it twisted like a blade in the heart. We were never mere obstacles in a man's tale, we were the ink, the parchment, the very story itself, forged through fire and sorrow. Across the courtyard, Margaret stood, her back straight, fists clenched. She was a tempest, a storm trapped in a fragile frame, rage flickering like an uncontained flame deep within her. The world had crafted her into a villain with every whispered insult. They said she was too cunning, too bold. But the truth was far more sinister. They feared her. They feared the unraveling of the roles they had pressed upon us, the chains of expectation that lay heavy at our feet. "Do you think they can silence us?" Margaret's voice cut through the night, sharp and unforgiving. "Do you think they can bury our voices beneath centuries of stone?" I recalled the echoes of laughter, the warmth of camaraderie that had flourished in the secret corners of our minds. We were no longer the fair maidens. No, we were the storm, the rage, the quiet strength that rumbled beneath the surface of society's expectations. We were the ones who had learned to wield our own narratives, to inscribe them in blood and grit. An eerie stillness enveloped us, the night pregnant with the weight of our unspoken truths. I turned to Elena, whose eyes sparkled with tears uncried. What if the stories we tell ourselves are the chains that bind us? Her breath hitched, and for a moment, I feared she might shatter under the weight of those words. But then she shook her head, her resolve hardening like steel. "No. We are the architects of our own fates. We will forge our own legends, beyond the fairy tale endings." The air crackled as if the world itself held its breath, waiting. Shadows flickered around us, dance partners in an unseen ballet, the stars above winking like mischievous deities. The moon hung high, a voyeur in our struggle for identity, illuminating the very ground where our feet stood firm. Margaret stepped forward, and the light caught the edge of her jaw, revealing a fierce beauty hidden beneath layers of defiance and anger. "We're not waiting for rescue anymore," she declared, her voice steady, unwavering. "The knights have their stories, but she paused, letting the weight of her words settle like dust in the air, "we will write our own endings." A shiver ran down my spine. The thought of wielding our narratives, of seizing the quill from the hands of those who thought they could author us, sent reverberations through my very core. The history books had been written, yes, but in every margin, in every tear-stained page, there lingered the essence of our unsung battles, our unyielding spirits. But the world outside our sanctuary was a beast, a snarling predator waiting for us to slip, to falter. I could feel its gaze upon us, hungry and accusing. I thought of the trials, the stakes that had been raised, of the fates that awaited women who dared to speak, to rise. It was a matriarchal minefield, where the spectre of shame loomed like a dark cloud, ready to rain down condemnation at the slightest misstep. "I remember," I whispered, my voice barely cutting through the tension, "the tales of those who vanished, who spoke too loudly and were silenced in the dark." A tremor of uncertainty flickered in Elena's eyes, but it was quickly eclipsed by a growing fire. "But we are not them," she retorted, her voice rising. "We are the daughters of every woman who endured, who fought, who laughed in the face of despair. We carry their strength, their ghosts, and we will not let it wither. The air hummed around us, electric and alive, and as the shadows shifted, I felt the pulse of countless generations thrumming beneath our feet. Each heartbeat was a reminder that we were not alone. The city outside was a labyrinth of despair, but within our hearts lay the potential to carve new paths through the darkness. Margaret's face broke into a fierce grin, wild and untamed. Let them come. Let them try to cage us. We are the storm. We are the thunder. And we will not be hushed. The words hung in the air like incense, heavy with promise. The rhythm of our collective heartbeat quickened, a cascade of defiance swelling between us. I felt it, the world shifting, the narrative bending. We were not the fair maidens waiting for rescue, we were the architects of chaos, wielding our stories like swords. And in that moment, as the night thickened with the weight of our resolve, I understood that we were the beginning of something unspeakably fierce, a chorus of voices that would not fade into history's shadows. So we stood, united, a triumvirate of fire, the air crackling with anticipation. The echoes of our ancestors whispered through the night, urging us onward, into a confrontation with history, with ourselves, and with the world that had sought to define us. I could feel it then, the promise of something greater, a revolution written in the ink of our lives, a tapestry of boldness unfurling before us. The world would tremble at our feet, and as we leaped into the fray, the shadows would not just watch, they would bear witness to our rise beyond the confines of a simplistic tale, forever etched in the annals of time. And though our story had only just begun, it sang with the resonance of 1,000 women, each voice a note in a symphony of defiance, echoing through the cosmos and beyond. The clang of metal on metal echoed through the stone halls, a sound both terrifying and intoxicating. I stood in the shadows, my heart a drumbeat against my ribcage, watching as Sir Alaric, a knight carved from myth and blood, prepared for battle. His hands, rough and sure, tightened around the hilt of his sword, a weapon that had tasted the bitterness of war too many times. But behind him, in the flickering firelight, stood Lady Eloan, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears, a silent storm brewing within her. She reached for him, fingers trembling, desperate to grasp the fleeting humanity that flickered in his gaze before he donned the armor of a beast. "I remember," she whispered, her voice choking on the weight of memories. "The way you held me beneath the stars, how you swore you'd come back." With every syllable, she pulled at the threads of a bond that felt as fragile as the air they breathed. The knights, the lords and ladies, they painted her world in colors she couldn't touch. Red for passion, black for grief, and gold for the veiler that seemed forever out of her reach. She was an afterthought, a prop in the grand play of chivalry, yet her longing surged with the force of a tempest. A noble woman meant to inspire, to console, to fade into the background while men clashed like thunder. What is it to be a knight's heart when you cannot even hold the sword, she thought, and in that moment, her solitude felt deafening. Each day was a tether pulled tighter, strangling her voice, binding her to the walls of expectation. The distance between them stretched like a chasm, and as Alaric turned away, that vast emptiness swallowed her whole. The clattering of his armor echoed through the hall like a death knell, each step a reminder that he was leaving her, their unspoken dreams, their shattered promises. And yet, she stood firm, fists clenched, as if willing the very shadows to shift in her favor. "I am more than just a steward of your legacy," she thought. "I am the fire that ignites your veiler." Across the battleground, her sister-in-law, Lady Isolde, felt the tremors of their world shift as Alaric's figure disappeared into the night. Isolde was nothing like Eloan with her soft words and gentle demeanor. She was a tempest dressed in silk, and while she had the heart of a lion, she played the role of a lady like a masterful actress. "A knight is only as strong as the woman who stands behind him," she would often say, but the irony twisted in her gut. She stood there in the shadow of her own marriage, shackled to a man who had never learned the weight of her heart. "I remember," she thought, recalling the whispered lies of love, the promises sewn into the fabric of their union. "The moment I traded my freedom for a title." The echoes of her own laughter seemed like a distant memory, drowned beneath the waves of expectation. She wore her smile like armor, but beneath the surface, she was roiling with a desperation that threatened to consume her. The knights charged into battle for honor, while the women remained, lingering like ghosts in a castle of dreams half forgotten. The night air thickened with tension, and the stars hung like silent witnesses to the chaos that unfolded. Alaric, engulfed by the adrenaline of impending conflict, thrust himself into the fray, blissfully unaware of the love that trembled behind him. Each swing of his sword felt electric with purpose, yet each kill painted his soul darker, deepening the chasm of his own humanity. But in the echoes of war, it was the women who carried the weight of their burdens in silence. Back at the castle, Eloan watched the shadows dance on the stone walls, haunted by the ghost of what could be. I could be more than this, she thought as she clenched the edges of her dress, tears carving rivers down her cheeks. I could taste the thrill of adventure, the sweet bitterness of freedom. But freedom was a distant star, a flicker of hope lost amid the darkness of male-dominated society. With every passing moment, her heart echoed a mournful refrain, the song of a woman forgotten. What if I followed him? The thought caught flame in her mind, illuminating the shadows that clung to her heart. What if I defied them all? The idea danced dangerously close to recklessness, but the very notion sent shards of exhilaration through her veins. She shivered, caught between the familiar prison of her existence and the wild, untamed possibility that lay just beyond the castle walls. With each heartbeat, she could feel the tension coiling tighter within her, a serpent waiting to strike. She yearned to unleash her fury upon a world that sought to confine her, yet the specter of societal expectations loomed large, whispering lies that slithered into her mind. You are naught but a lady. Stay within your bounds. Isolde's laughter rang hollow in her ears, a reminder of the chains they wore. Each chain linked by the blood of generations, each link forged in the fires of duty and tradition. Our fates are intertwined, Isolde said, but what if we cut these ties? The words hung heavy between them, laden with urgency and sorrow. As the battle raged outside, a confrontation loomed within, the kind that rattled the bones and stirred the ghosts of lost ambitions. Eloan and Isolde, sisters in spirit, felt the pull of destiny tugging at their very souls. The world had painted their paths in muted greys, but now the colors swirled before them, vibrant and terrifying. They stood at a precipice, each heartbeat resonating with raw emotion. What if we defy them? Eloan breathed, her voice a fragile thread woven into the dark tapestry of their reality. What if we seize our own stories? In that moment, the wind shifted, whispering promises of rebellion, of dreams unchained. The night wrapped around them like a cloak woven from the memories of every woman who had ever been silenced. With a single thought, the world began to tremble, and the shadows leapt in anticipation, hungry for the dawn of a new era. As the clamor of battle echoed through the castle, a new fight awakened within the hearts of the women who had been overlooked, their souls igniting with newfound resolve. The clock ticked, each second a reminder that time was slipping away, yet each moment held the promise of all that could be. The air crackled with tension, a palpable energy that vibrated through their veins, spiraling into an unknown future. War raged, but the battle for their own voices had only just begun. And in the darkness of that night, as swords clashed and hearts broke, something fierce and unyielding stirred within them, a tempest of possibility that would not be easily extinguished. The story had just begun to unfold, weaving a narrative of strength, defiance, and the haunting echoes of women who dared to dream beyond the confines of their reality. With every breath, every heartbeat, they would rise. The end was not near, it was merely the beginning of a new chapter, an uncharted territory where the roles of women in the lives of knights would break free from the chains of expectation. The shadows whispered, and the night held its breath, waiting for the dawn to break.